2 o'clock. It feels like a Friday in January. Best way I can explain that. It's cold, a little cloudy, a little blue skies here in downtown Salt Lake City, Utah. But as it is every single day, it is good to have you along for the ride. My name is Spence Checketts. I host this program. That young man is named Porter Larson. He's producing the show today. Happy Friday to you. Congratulations. You made it weekend time. You made it to Friday and got a lot to do. On the show today. I thought we saw a great college football game last night. It's at Notre Dame march on. And Marcus Freeman, at the age of 39, has a chance to become the first black head coach in college football history to win a national championship. Very impressive run after a rough start. At the age of 35, about 4 years back, year one wasn't great. They lost to Marshall at home. This year, the Northern Illinois loss, week 2. In South Bend, caught a lot of people off guard, but Marcus Freeman is an impressive young coach, and Notre Dame with a really massive win for that program, and ultimately a really exciting college football game took place last night. Hoping for a little bit more of the same tonight, but potentially a little bit more up and down action is my guess. Both Texas and Ohio State throughout the course of the season have shown the ability to be a little bit more explosive. Both Notre Dame and Penn State are run-first football teams. They don't even really include wide receivers. But we saw a really fun game, I thought, last night. The Capital One Orange Bowl down in Miami, down in Florida. And now we move over to the state of Texas for the game tonight, which should be a good one. Ohio State is still a 6-point favorite. That line has not moved very much at all. The over-under is 51.5. The game is played in Arlington. It is the Cotton Bowl, where once upon a time, young Steve Sarkisian led Brigham Young to a Cotton Bowl win and an MVP appearance, as Steve was the quarterback for that team. Really good BYU team. I still feel like that spread is not enough. I get the sense that Ohio State will win this by double digits. That's just my best guess. Do not take that to the bank. Do not bet on sports. You work too hard for your money. Keep it in your bank account. Keep it in your pocket. But enjoy the game tonight. You can hear the game on this little old radio station after we say goodnight at 6 o'clock. So stay tuned for that. We're going to talk a lot of college football on the program today. And, of course, one day away from what I perceive to be the best NFL playoff weekend. Some people love the divisional round, as do I. But we got a couple of games coming up on Saturday. We got Chargers, Texans, Steelers, Ravens. And then a fun tilt on Sunday, which is the Broncos, Bills, Packers, and the Eagles, the Commanders, and the Bucks. Culminating with a Monday night football game in Glendale, Arizona. The game has been moved officially. Man, those scenes in L.A., goodness gracious, apocalyptic. Hopefully they can get that stuff under control. Feels like maybe things are moving in the right direction, but a lot of people out of their homes, a lot of people losing everything they've ever built, and it's just a total tragedy. So they moved the game from Los Angeles to Glendale. That did affect the line a little bit. Vikings were a 1.5-point favorite prior to that announcement, and now Minnesota is getting 3 points, and the over-under is 47.5. The Utah Jazz continue to masterfully tank. They're doing such an excellent job when it comes to this tankathon, tankapalooza. We'll come up with a witty name for you, but they're playing close competitive games against good NBA teams with vets, and that's the only way that these young Jazz players are going to get any sort of big game intense experience, because playoff basketball will not be a part of the Jazz for probably a couple of years. And as we discussed prior to the OKC Cleveland game, Donovan's second year when the Jazz made that little playoff run and beat OKC, the Paul George, Melo, Westbrook OKC team, when Ricky Rubio just embarrassed Russell Westbrook. Donovan getting the keys to the car and understanding what it is to be the main scoring cog for a playoff team was such a massive deal. And unfortunately, we're seeing it pay off, I should say, for a city that isn't Salt Lake, because Donovan's playing great basketball for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So some of the Jazz young players continue to get some good experience. Some of the best minutes that I've seen in a long time from Cody Williams last night. Won't show up in the box score, but Cody had a solid night. We're still waiting for Keontae George to come back from that left heel injury. Bryce Sensabaugh did not play last night either. Good games from Colin Sexton, Larry Markkinen, but the Miami Heat got the win, and that is exactly what you want. I know it's counterintuitive, but that's kind of the deal here. How about Real Salt Lake coming in out of nowhere off the top rope? I know that's what you guys want on a Friday prior to a massive football weekend. You want to talk a little RSL, and we're going to talk a little RSL on the program today. Chicho Arango is gone. Chicho is headed to San Jose, and RSL did not get much in return. And I've got a little insight here, talking to some people throughout the course of the morning after this news broke. Chicho probably had, I don't know, one of, if not the best, 16, 17-game stretches in the history of the club. Looked like he was high speed ahead to breaking the record for goals scored, single-season goals scored, and looked like he was going to be in the mix for MLS MVP, but he dropped off dramatically following a midseason suspension. And it's one of those situations I think we'll always talk about. This RSL club last year is a team that could have done something special. And when that suspension went down, a lot of people wondered aloud and behind the scenes whether or not it was going to knock the team off kind of that great stretch they were on, and it did. $1.5 million in what's called general allocation money, or GAM for the layman's, and an open international spot in exchange for Chicho. That's not a lot. RSL did not get a lot for Chicho Arango. Chicho came to RSL last year from Liga MX for a club record $6 million. So we'll get to some of that on the show today as RSL dropping a bomb after transferring Matty Crooks, trading Anderson Julio. Looks like it's going to be a brand new club coming up, and they've got a game next month. CONCACAF gets going. So we'll get to some of that on a Friday afternoon. Really good guest list. Excited for the show today. Yogi Roth stops by right off the top to talk some college football. Our old friend from the Pac-12 Network who landed on his feet because, of course, he did with the Big Ten. Going to bring in Tom Bogert, who will kind of help us understand why RSL made the moves they did today and what could be next. Tom covers soccer, has for a long time at a high level. I'm not sure I've interviewed Tom before, but we'll bring him in coming up at 3 o'clock. So for you RSL fans curious about these moves, the RSL front office unable at this point to comment because these are deals. The Chicho deal is not official, just rumors, but I have been told that it is done. That is happening. So no Matt Crooks, no Chicho Arango, no Anderson Julio, and we'll see what's next for RSL. After Tom stops by, we're going to bring in Howard Beck, NBA Daily Assist style today on a Friday. The triumphant return of J.L. Covan to the program. If you're familiar with this show, first of all, thank you. Hello, how are you? Second of all, JL has been a guest on this program for a number of years. I became familiar with him when he came into town, do a little stand-up comedy. He is a lawyer from New Jersey who's a massive jazz fan, and we'd like to have a little fun on a Friday. JL does a dynamite Donald Trump impersonation, so we bring in JL to break down jazz basketball in the voice of Donald Trump, the incoming president of the United States. So we'll bring in JL today. Everyone relax. It's pretty funny, so just calm down. Then Max Chadwick stops by for some more football. So Yogi Roth, Howard Beck, Tom Bogert, J.L. Covan, Max Chadwick, me, Spence Checketts, all of you the great listeners, and Chicho Arango's #1 fan behind the glass there.
What's up?
RSL dropping a bomb on a Friday afternoon. It should be more about football.
Yeah, man. A little Friday news dump from the local soccer club. And as you mentioned, it's not just Chicho. It's all over the map. That's going to be a completely retooled roster. But the good part about that, if you're looking for silver linings and you had a fun time as an RSL fan last season, is that means they've got a bunch of assets to kind of allocate elsewhere. But TBD on that. So we'll get Tom and your insight and learn a little more.
No doubt, no doubt. So happy Friday to you. Appreciate you making this show a part of your day today and every day. For you everyday listeners, we appreciate you. Yogi Roth will be our first guest right out of the gates on a Friday. But before we get to Yogi, courtesy of our good friends at Standard Restaurant Supply, it's your tailgate headquarters. Get everything you need to make your tailgate epic. Stop by their location at 3500 Southwest Temple or check them out online at standardrestaurant.com. It is time now for your opening tip. So the powers that be in college football, and that is a group that includes a lot of people. That's not a statement you can make that indicates a couple of dudes in a back office somewhere. That includes powerful television executives. That includes conference commissioners, administrators, and member institutions. It feels like and this is just my opinion, one man's opinion, it feels like the 12-team CFP has been an absolute smash success when it comes to what the folks that did this initially were trying to accomplish. The ratings are through the roof. We're left now with 3 big blue blood programs. Say what you want about that. That's good news for power brokers in college football. And I thought last night was a lot of fun. It was the Capital One Orange Bowl as the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, after a slow start, able to come back there and beat Penn State 27-24. Marcus Freeman is wildly impressive. And, typically I do like to listen to coaches speak after games. The ones that decide not to be pithy and dismissive and actually want to discuss what's real and what you just saw and what they were trying to do. And Marcus Freeman strikes me as just an incredible communicator. Players seem to love him. And at the age of 39 years old, he now has a chance to become the first black coach in college football history to win a national championship. And you can tell that's not something that he dismisses or diminishes. It's very important to him. James Franklin on the other side for Penn State. My man just cannot beat a top 5 team. That's their 12th straight loss. Penn State's 12th straight loss under James Franklin to a top 5 program, and they just cannot get over that hump. I mean, he's a fine coach, and Penn State, year in and year out. I mean, we saw it with Utah in the Rose Bowl. They win a lot of games. They're very, very good. They're typically in the mix for the conference championship, but they're never quite, Ohio State, Michigan, what have you. And they never, at least under Franklin, have been able to win like the massive big game. And I do find the conversation very interesting around coaches that coach in places and for schools that have such audacious expectations. Like there are several Ohio State fans that believe Ryan Day should be fired if he doesn't win a national championship. Like we talk a lot about our coaches here locally, and quite frankly, if you call it how it is, if you're a coach in the state of Utah, chances are you've got a pretty good gig. We don't fire coaches much here. And the coaches that land jobs and do a good job, they stay around for a long, long time. More often than not, they stay around until they decide they want to go. Right? Coach Witt, Kalani, right now at BYU. Bronco before Kalani. Bronco is the one that decided independence wasn't sustainable. Oh, and I'm going to triple my salary. So I'm going to Virginia. Kalani just signed a long-term deal. It feels like they've got that ticket, and he will tell them when he's done. And obviously, Coach Witt is in a spot that he will tell Utah and the rest of us when he's done. Quinn Snyder elected to leave because he didn't want to work for this new ownership group, and in his words, didn't see any pathway moving forward as it became clear that the new Jazz front office was going to break down a very good team, brick, by trading Gobert, trading Mitchell, getting rid of O'Neal, Ingles, I could keep going. Mike Conley broke the whole thing down. Bojan Bogdanovic. And Quinn let them know, I'm good. Good luck. I'm out. Jerry Sloan was the one who made the call after, of course, a very uncomfortable, to say the least, fractured, frayed relationship with his star point guard, Darren Williams. Jerry was the one who said, I've had enough. He was not forced out the door. Greg, Gail Miller, the Millers at the time, had no interest in firing a legendary head coach in Jerry Sloan, and it was a good team at the time too, but Jerry decided he was done. Quinn decided he was done. Are there exceptions? Yes. Tyrone Corbin, who just was not a very good basketball coach, was encouraged by Dennis Lindsay to find something more constructive to do with his time. It happens from time to time, but not all that often here. More often than not, coaches get to call their shot when they're done. It's happened at RSL. I mean, Jason Christ decided to bounce. They moved on from John Ellinger early, but it was Jason's decision to leave. I think the Jeff Cassar thing's a little bit different, and I can't remember the New Yorker who everybody was afraid of. Petke. He was let go. Freddie Juarez decided he was leaving, head up to Seattle. Feels like Pablo Mastroeni right now has a ton of job security. And you listen to the way that some of these college fan bases talk about their coach who essentially wins conference championships, wins a lot of games, but can't beat the rival 0-4 against Michigan. And if Ryan Day doesn't win tonight, if Ohio State doesn't win tonight, Like, there's a legitimate chance my man got to the precipice of winning the CFP national championship and will lose his job. It is wild with some of these expectations. I do think tonight will be a little bit more up and down than last night was. Last night stalled a little bit. Notre Dame at the end clearly had a much better organized plan with their clock management, running the football with their quarterback, Riley Leonard, who had a really, really good game. Jeremiah Love had moments, but you could tell, of course, that knee was bothering him. And on the other side, after a quick start, the Nicholas Singleton kid had a great game, but Drew Allard did not play well. They could not open up the field. They tried to get down the field on their final possession, but Notre Dame was ready for everything that Penn State threw at them there at the end. And after a rough start, I thought we saw a really entertaining football game last night in the Orange Bowl. And like I said, tonight, Cotton Bowl. In Arlington, AT&T Stadium. I'm anticipating another good game. I think it'll be a little bit more up and down, but I do feel like Ohio State is the side here, as they're only a 6-point favorite. Over-under is 51.5. All right, more college football coming up on the other side. Our guy Yogi Roth will stop by from the Pac-12 Network. We'll move over to Tom Bogert, talk a little RSL, the news of the day today. Chicho Arango has been moved to San Jose for some general allocation money and also an international slot. So we'll get with Tom about that. We'll do some jazz and some NBA with Howard Beck. Little comic relief because we could all use it on a Friday with JL Covan. More football with Max Chadwick. We'll say goodnight at 6 o'clock on a Friday right here on ESPN 700. Ohio State take on Texas. So we'll send you over there right at 5:30, maybe a little bit earlier, so we can get you there for kickoff. We were a little bit delayed last night with the Craig Smith Coaches Show, but you will hear every snap, every down of Ohio State and Texas on the station. Ohio State 6-point favorite for the game tonight. Over-under is 51.5. We are going to bring in Yogi Roth in just a moment. Our guy is on site at the Cotton Bowl, so excited to chat with him. Porter, I believe you and I had a little wager on the Penn State Notre Dame game last night, huh?
I guess that was a little unofficial.
No. Official.
Fair. It was on air, so
it's
that
on
makes
air,
it official,
and
right?
everything's online, so you can't run from it. So I took Notre Dame, you took Penn State, and the loser has to audition for the new Yellowstone spinoff with Beth and what's the big dude's name?
Rip.
I think it's Rip. Kip is Napoleon Dynamite. Rip is Yellowstone. Beth
same
is
thing,
the girl.
honestly.
And they have a new show, and so you have to go audition for that now.
Okay, I'll update my headshot and send it in.
No, just use what you used when you auditioned for Yellowstone season 1.
All right, it didn't work though. So
well, look, when you do things for the first time, Porter, you're not going to be very good at it. So now this will be a second audition for you, and I think you're going to nail it. What if you landed like a life-changing part?
Well, then you're going to have to find a new producer, bud.
We'll figure that out. If you landed a life-changing role in a TV series, I would give you a big hug and send you on your way and wish you luck.
That's fair. I don't know if I really have any interest in like playing a character of any form, but I'm open to it if they sign a big enough check.
But here's the thing, man. I mean, I know you didn't watch a ton of Yellowstone, but the cowboy cosplaying by most of the characters, like you know how to ride a horse. You know how to rope a steer. Is that a thing?
Yeah, you can rope a steer.
Rope a steer. What do they call the event at the rodeo when you're on the horse and you're trying to rope the little cattle?
And you hop off?
Yeah.
That's tie down.
Yeah, you can do that stuff.
I actually did until I was a freshman. My horse Homer died.
That's what I'm saying. Shout out Homer on a Friday. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
But I think there's some meat on this bone. They could use a strapping, handsome young man who actually knows his way around a horse on that show.
I don't disagree with you. I've been bitter.
Can you play the guitar and sing cheesy country songs?
Someone's gonna have to play the guitar for me. I've tried.
Mm-hmm.
My whole family is like wildly musically inclined.
Uh-huh.
I can carry a tune.
I could believe that.
But not with an instrument for some reason.
All right, fair enough. So Porter lost the bet. He has to try out for Yellowstone again. Maybe we'll double or nothing on the game tonight. But I don't want to give you – well, you know who I'm picking. I mean, would you dare – Sean picked Texas during crosstalk. Our guy OC picked Texas. Would you dare zig when everyone's zagging? It feels like it's Ohio State's win.
Well, and to be clear, last night I remember on the show, I for the sake of radio, I kind of went against you but had the same feelings with you with Notre Dame. But I don't know that I have that feeling today. I think that Ohio State does win, and I think they win by a touchdown or so. But I just hope for a good game. But we'll see. We'll see. Give me until when we hang up, 5:20 or so,
okay,
and I'll have a better feel of the Longhorns. That's the other thing, Spence. They're basically at home. How does that affect the game, right? When you're playing in Arlington, I'll think on that in the next couple hours.
I 100% believe that's affected the line. I don't think if this game was being played in like Nebraska or California or something, I think Ohio State would be like a 10-point favorite.
I like the idea of playing a neutral site Nebraska game in January for the CFP. So maybe Laramie.
I get cold even thinking about that, man.
Let's do it.
But yeah, neutral field. I think Ohio State might scratch double digits as far as the favorite with how they played. So we'll have to see. But stay tuned. 5:30 sharp. We're going to send you to the Cotton Bowl. So you're going to hear the kick. You're going to hear every single play. Ohio State, Texas tonight. Of course, the winner advances on to take on Notre Dame. And if you are a college football fan, this 12-team CFP has really unfolded, I think, as well as you probably could have expected. Now, obviously, if you have a dog in a fight that did not advance, you're bummed out with that. Or maybe you're a BYU fan who feels like you were slighted and should have had an opportunity to show yourself on the biggest of the college football stage. But, BYU with a great Alamo Bowl win, nothing to, hang their heads about. But tonight should be fun. So we're going to say goodnight just in time for kick, 5:30 with Ohio State and Texas. Let's go live to the Cotton Bowl where our guy Yogi Roth is standing by. Yogi, happy Friday, man. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. I literally just took my first step on the field, and I'm walking around, and this thing is gorgeous right now, man. The turf is beautiful. It's empty, of course, a couple hours ahead of kickoff, but you could feel the juice with the big brands that are playing in this big time game coming up in a matter of hours.
That's awesome, man. I'm pumped that you're there. That's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get there, though, let's do a little local stuff. Then I want to get to the Notre Dame win, and then we'll finish with your thoughts on what we could see with the bowl game tonight. And, you know, Yogi, you're now with the Big Ten Network, but for a number of years, you were one of our favorite voices to tap into with the Pac-12 Network to help us kind of understand the world of college football and how that, you know, how that conference was kind of playing out. And obviously you covered Utah at a very high level, and we miss, you know, hearing from you more consistently. And this certainly was a year that none of us expected. But since you and I last spoke, Coach Witt announces he's coming back. They have 16 players in the transfer portal coming in. They've got 25 freshmen, 41 new players. 53% of the roster is going to be new. They've hired a new offensive coordinator. So I guess the way I'll phrase it is, what gives you the most confidence that this last year for Utah football was simply a moment in time and not the new normal?
Well, I think it's your starting quarterback got hurt. Let's start with that.
Yeah,
You know, I just think in this era, and we've talked about Isaac Wilson many times in that quarterback room, and I think he did what you'd imagine a first-year player doing, right? Some brilliant moments, some challenging moments, some learning moments, some tough moments, right? And I'm sure somewhere he had to really look in the mirror and say, all right, what is best for me? You know, what matters most when he hit the portal and decided to come back. So I go to that. I just think it was massive. I think it was, of course, a disappointing season. I mean, I think everyone in the country, definitely myself, I thought Utah would go in and be the bully in that league. And the team that was picked last ended up winning it, and they were targeting away from potentially being where I am right now in Kenny Dillingham leading Arizona State. So, you know, you're right on. It could flip fast. Either way, I don't think it's going to become a trend at Utah in terms of losing in the style in which they did. I think Kyle Whittingham is too experienced. Sorry, I'm going to try to get off the field as they're on the big microphone here.
All good.
But I think that Kyle is just too talented, which I think he understands how to adjust to current realities when it comes to major college football and how you develop and how you build and rebuild a roster. I think Morgan Scalley, as the head coach in waiting, knows that he's also building the program he's on the verge of taking over, whether that's one more season or who knows. So I don't anticipate this thing repeating again. I think there's some fun questions. I know they had an extensive search for an offensive coordinator. I think they landed with Coach Beck with somebody that I talked to. Many head coaches were trying to get him to become their offensive coordinator, and in comes Dan Peart as the quarterback. I saw him a few times this year on tape playing against Washington State, of course, and I think Arizona. So they've got some talent. It's going to be fun to watch him mold it, and he's as good as there is at doing that. I mean, you have to me, take the long lens on this thing with Kyle Whittingham. It's not like he forgot how to coach by any stretch or build culture. And I think with the 41 newcomers that you referenced, that's also, I think, going to be a relative reality. I mean, most teams have that now. When you look at even, you know, notwithstanding Ohio State, but you look at Texas or you look at Oregon, and from last year to this year and then heading into next year, I think, you know, 25 to 40-ish players are going to be new within your program naturally from a bunch of different avenues.
Let me follow up with this, because I've been getting the takes of people I respect who cover college football on this general dynamic. And as you know, Yogi, Coach Witt, like other programs, you know, K-State's one that comes to mind in the Big 12. I mean, Kyle built this thing up on the ethos of recruit and develop. And the most successful Utah football years that we've seen, dating back to the early 2000s, the Fiesta Bowl team in 2004, the Sugar Bowl team in 2008, the two Pac-12 championship teams, have come when Utah football has been able to recruit, and not even necessarily 4 or 5-star guys, just recruit guys they like, develop them over time, and then win with like 3rd and 4th year players. Is that still a model to win in college football in the modern day?
Well, look at the 4 teams there in the semifinal, and they've all done it that way. None of these teams went out and just purchased a roster or purged a roster, right? They built it from within, and then in the new era that I don't think it's enough dialogue is the retention of players. You know, look at Ohio State. I've been covering them extensively over the last month. I've been traveling and seeing them and interviewing guys, and their best players normally were identified, really talented. They developed, and they're 3 and out. Well, now they're coming on back for year number 4, year number 5, because they have unfinished business and the culture and the team. I'm telling you, man, you'd be so impressed with this roster. Like, okay, 20 million, take that and now put it to the side and know it in the back of your head. And I'm going to tell you, this is the most selfless team I've ever been around in my career. And I think the most talented. I think the most talented. USC had always been that, and I'm probably a little biased towards that because I was on that staff. Talking 2005, Reggie, Matt, Lendell, Dwayne Jarrett, Steve Smith, a litany of guys on the defensive side that went on to the NFL. Brian Cushing, Ray Malunga, Terrell Thomas, Super Bowl winners. I look at this team, and I thought it in camp, and then having covered them the last couple of weeks, it looks that way in person. You watch them practice, you watch them compete, of course you watch them perform, but then you talk to them. I mean, they got 2 running backs. I think it's 924 or 925 yards on the season. Nobody's complaining about carries. You look at the receiving core. Nobody's complaining about touches. Look at the offensive line. They had an All-American guard who came back. He's going to be an early draft pick. He came back to develop at guard. Midway through the season, I said, you got to play tackle. Like a totally different language for an offensive lineman. Didn't flinch. Like, it's been so impressive. So why do I say all that? Well, Kyle Whittingham does that too. Right? I think we've seen a version of that. I feel like run it back has been like a theme for the last 3 years, or The Last Dance has been a theme for the last 2 years, or whatever it's been with these players. So I think they have a really strong culture that they're still going to have to identify, and they're going to have, I believe, from everything I know, they have the resources to retain, which I think is really important, and as well acquire, which is, as we all know now, part of the game. So I don't think they change that much. Maybe the numbers adjust, 5 players less maybe in high school and 5 more in the portal. But now with the scholarship numbers, I don't know. I haven't talked to Coach Whittingham or Morgan Scalley about their approach around 105 and that number and how they're going to break it down. But I don't think they'll have any problem continuing this thing going. I mean, it's just too strong, man. They've got so many amazing things to sell, whether it's the fan base, of course, and the stadium and the environment and the NFL projections. Like, there's so many good things for this team. And, you know, they had a down year. We've seen that many places in the past. And when you have a strong culture and tradition, like, you can bounce back. I'm not going to think they're not bouncing back. I just refuse to believe that under the leadership they have and the understanding that so many guys on that staff know what Utah football is and is capable of.
Yeah, your point about it happening in other places needs to be underscored because we have been spoiled by what Kyle has built, and then the expectations of the fan base are just different than they used to be. So we kind of have blinders on here at times. But, you know, interestingly enough, Yogi, Utah picked to finish first in the Big 12, and they finished near the bottom. BYU picked to finish 13th, and they darn near won the thing, but they stumbled a bit down the stretch. I wonder your thoughts on, you know, the season Kalani was able to put together, culminated by a really strong Alamo Bowl win over a very good Colorado team.
I'd call it a dominant win over a very good Colorado team.
Yep.
I think I was just thrilled for Kalani Sitake and Aaron Roderick and company. I mean, I've known those guys for so long. I feel like since I moved out west 20 years ago, they were some of the first faces I met in the football world, and they've been people I've leaned on in the past, and you're just happy for them, you know, as that shakes out. Their quarterback, the story was amazing to track all season. And I think this for that league in the Big 12, it just kept reminding me of the Pac-12, you know, in 2018, 2019, where teams just kept beating each other. And every week was kind of must-see if you were paying attention to that league. But the rest of the country easily just took shots at it. That's what it felt like. And I think even for me now, it was pretty healthy going to the Big Ten and, you know, zooming out on just the West, you know, and focusing from, you know, California and USC all the way out to Rutgers and all the schools in between. And, you know, I'm still dramatically connected to promoting college football through the lens of the West Coast with my podcast, Y Option. So I didn't eliminate that lens, but having another one, I think it was pretty cool to have, because you look at the Big 12 and you're like, yeah, nobody's giving that league really any respect. As soon as Utah started losing, because they were carrying the torch going in, like Deion and Colorado always had juice, but nobody, I think, ever really thought they were a real threat to win that league or make noise in the CFP. So when Utah fell off, K-State fell off, it was kind of like, all right, whatever. Like, this is a really fun league. And then here it comes. And here came Arizona State with the noise they made in the playoff. It just reminded me a ton of the Pac-12, and there's so much dialogue around 2 super conferences and the Big Ten and the SEC. And I think rightfully so, just the way that, you know, college football has evolved, right? Whether it's off the field and the power players that are in college football, et cetera. But it's a cool league, man. And I was fired up for BYU, and I was glued into a bunch of their games. I'd be flying home and they'd be that game on at night often. And it was fun just to kind of watch him grow and develop under Kalani. And it seemed like coming into the season, he had a lot of heat on him. And now I'd imagine, people are celebrating him as they should.
Yeah, got a good extension. So happy for our friend who used to be the defensive coordinator for the Utes up here. All right, before we get to last night and then finish with tonight, do you dare? I tried this week. I sat down on Monday morning. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do a Big 12 football prediction show segment today on a Monday, And, dude, I have zero clue. No idea. And it's January. There are games still being played. But do you have any pulse on what this conference could look like come fall?
Yeah, I feel pretty confident about Arizona State is going to still keep this thing moving. The trajectory I love. You look what Graham Rossini's done, the athletic director. So, man, it's just so impressive. He did an interview with me on my podcast at Media Days in July, and he talked about the resources important in football, and they backed it up. I mean, extension to both coordinators who are highly sought after, as they should have been, and Brian Ward and Marcus Arroyo, and then you lock in Kenny Dillingham. The collective continues to grow. Look at the buzz, right? Arizona State has always been the sleeping giant that I think was actualized this year in major college football. So I don't see any reason why you're not just going to continue to bank on the growth and evolution of Sam Levin and company. I have talked to Brent Brennan a lot. I think it was such an anomaly for them to be as down as they were. They'll make a bounce back. Will they be up for the league? I don't know, but they'll be much better than they were. And then after that, I'm curious. You look at Colorado, I think it was always easy to kind of poke at them a little bit and say, are they really going to keep it going? Well, they get Caden Salter out of Liberty. Really, to me, a very impressive quarterback. They get the number one quarterback in America in Julian Lewis. You can't argue what you saw on tape. And I know you guys saw that in the latter part of the season in the game against Utah in Boulder. So I probably lean to some of the teams in the West. And then I think of Avery Johnson. I called the Kansas-Iowa State game this year. It was really fun just to dive into that league and go to Arrowhead and watch those guys continue to, bounce back, whether it was KU bouncing back with Daniels. He's coming back again. He's a really talented player. Avery Johnson will be a Heisman candidate coming into the season. He'll be one of the sexy names. So, again, it's just so deep as a league that I think it makes it really fun. And I just go to the quarterback play, man. I love when a league has premier quarterback play. I think the Big Ten was down this year. I think I was the one part of being in a new league, I was a little disappointed where it just wasn't as consistent as I think you hoped.
So I thought last night was fun, and, I certainly don't know Marcus Freeman personally, but what an impressive coach, what an impressive communicator. And, when he took over for Brian Kelly that first year, there was a Marshall loss at home. They lose to Northern Illinois week 2 this year at home, and now here he is at the age of 39 with a chance to win a national championship. Now, I just am so impressed with his ability to clearly communicate what he expects from his players, and they obviously have bought in. It's a very Notre Dame feel when you watch them play. But give me the Yogi Roth take on the way that game kind of played out last night.
Well, I was texting Notre Dame alum Ted Robinson all night long.
He was on the show yesterday. We had him on yesterday.
Oh, I love him. I miss him.
The best.
And I said, hey, the turning point of Notre Dame's season was last year. Pac-12 Network, Notre Dame Stanford season finale. Give a little tip of the cap to the old Pac-12.
Love it.
But no, man, we had a chance to be around Marcus a bunch that week in advance of the game or at the game, and he was just incredible, man. He was a really fun guy to get to know. The program was really likable. I think all the articles and commentary around Notre Dame is true. I grew up a huge Notre Dame fan. I wanted to go there. I remember going to camp there with Bob Davie and Urban Meyer as the wide receiver coach and trying to do my best for them. And it felt like it was always a villain in college football per se. And they're not. I think people have really fallen in love, to your point, with the humility that their head coach Marcus Freeman has, that their players have, the style in which they play. And it's just a huge brand. I mean, I don't know what the number was last night. I haven't looked, but I got to imagine them versus Penn State. That was like a throwback to the 90s, man. I'd imagine 20, 30 million people watched that. I have no idea, but I couldn't imagine why they wouldn't. It was a great game and two of the truest brands in the history of the game that we all love.
Yeah, and I think this thing, I talked about it during the opening segment today. I think this thing has really unfolded in a way that, most people that were skeptical should probably pay attention to. And, if you have a dog in the fight and you didn't feel like you got a fair shot, I understand why Oregon fans feel a little hard done with Ohio State, and the seeding and how that played out. But it's been fun. Last night was fun. Pumped for tonight, Yogi. What's your gut tell you? What sort of entertainment are we in for tonight with the Cotton Bowl?
Oh, I think it's going to be great, man. I mean, I went over to the Texas hotel yesterday to hang out with Sark and members of that staff just because I knew him from my time. Obviously, at USC, he's kind of taught me the foundation in my football life. And then you look at the other side and Ryan Day, and I've been tracking them in Ohio State and Chip Kelly for really the entirety of the season since July. And they're just great stories back and forth. I think you look at a team in Ohio State that after they lost that game to Michigan, they had this players-only meeting, and they aired all the things they needed to air. And a big part of it, I think, was deflating the pressure that was so big. I referenced the 05 team I coached at SC. We were going for 3 straight national championships. The pressure was insane. But Pete Carroll has this beautiful way to make every day just feel like a competitive moment that you wanted to maximize. Watching Ohio State in camp, I said, they remind me of the Trojans. After that, I said, oh, my God, like, who is this team all year long? They seem to be tight all season until they unloaded on Tennessee, until they dominated Oregon. And having interviewed a bunch of the players, they all said the same thing, which is we played free, we played loose, we played with this childlike joy. So to me, if they can jump on Texas early, it's a rout. If Texas jumps on Ohio State, if it's 10-3 or 0-0 after 1, like it was against Purdue, or 7-0 like it was against Northwestern late in the season, like I'm saying these scores, and your listeners are probably like, what? That's what happened in the Northwestern or Purdue game? But that's who Ohio State was in mid to late November. So I'd be curious mentally, how do they navigate being down? How free are they still playing when a $20 million reported dollar roster is down in a semifinal game? I kind of want to see it because I think they'll bounce back. I think they're built for it. I really think this team has turned the corner. And God, do I think they're talented, man. I mean, I don't know where there's a weakness. And then for Texas on the other side, yeah, they're going to want to run the football, but I wouldn't be shocked to see Sark just say, let me just deal and see if Quinn Ewers can go up tempo, can spin it, and just cut it loose because he's a dynamic play caller, as you all know, and as all the BYU fans know. I think it was funny in the presser yesterday. They were like, 1997 Cotton Bowl MVP, Steve Sarkisian, or something like that. It was pretty funny. Yep. Throwback to like me in high school, man. But overall, I hope it's a good game. It's really cool though. The vibe here, 200 miles from Austin, it feels unique. I've done a bunch of these now, semifinals or championship type games, and this is big time. Like it feels different. It feels like it should feel in the national semifinal in Dallas.
Ultimately, Yogi, I buried the lead. I've checked in on all my friends that are in the greater Los Angeles area, and I'm hearing your voice, so I know that you are fine. But those scenes are apocalyptic, man. You hanging in there?
Oh, my God. What a heartbreaking story. I mean, it's so sad. Yeah. We've had, like, all of our, collective of friends that live in Los Angeles and the west side of L.A. lose homes, lose cars, lose everything. We're about a mile away from the latest evacuation zone, and we're kind of like the only sliver of LA that hasn't been evacuated. So my kids and my wife, we're good. In-laws in the evacuation zone. So it's a sobering deal, as you can imagine, as you watch it, and then as you talk to people and you hear their voices break. My colleague Rhett Lewis, who you probably know and have had on many times, he was a sideline analyst for us this year, become just a dear friend, and he doesn't know if his house is still around. They live up in Malibu. Like, there's just so much of unknown still. And I think we live in a world where, like, the hottest of news jumps to the front of mind. But this thing's going to live on like it did in Maui it's going to be a year plus. It's going to be a while for this thing to finally find its way to clear out, whether it's clearing out debris, clearing out your home, beginning the journey to rebuild it. I mean, I think of the school like Palisades High School. Pali High is an iconic school, man, and it's just wiped out. So LA is resilient. LA will come together. It already has. We'll find a way, but it's no joke. Like, this is something I've never seen in my entire life, and I look forward to getting home tomorrow and just loving up on our neighbors and our community.
All right, man. Well, I'm glad to hear you're safe, because every time I see the scenes, I'm like, this is, I spent a year working out there, and so I'm not a local, but I'm familiar with the landscape. So glad you're safe, man. Enjoy the game tonight. As always, I just always really appreciate your time, man. You're so good at this. Thanks, man.
Oh, dude, anytime. Love coming on. And hey, the best news, it was Ted Robinson. I got to follow up Teddy ball game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Notre Dame wins.
Uncle Ted yesterday, Yogi today, man. Yeah, it's all good.
You got to have Ted on before Notre Dame plays in the champ game. I mean, that's just that's like a must. Everybody's going to be asking for him.
Yeah, you know I will, bud. Okay, be safe and travel safe, okay?
All right. Later, dude.
All right, the great Yogi Roth, number of years with the Pac-12 Network. Now he's with the Big Ten Network, and he has a podcast called Y Option, and he really still covers the West Coast. I mean, he's with the Big Ten Network, but he does a lot of Utah stuff, a lot of BYU stuff. Get the links to all of his work up on his Twitter page or whatever we're calling it these days. At Yogi Roth is where you find him. All right, let's see. Let's give away a little cash. How about that? The ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff is here. Time for your shot to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills. Text CHECK right now to 508-777-1000. That's CHECK to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us here at ESPN 700. Got to tell you about my friends at Prize Picks. Playoff time, man. The wild card round starts tomorrow in pro football. Should be a lot of fun. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Giving away free money so you guys can try it, see if you like it, go from there. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. So download that Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game all season long. Going to take a little break from the football conversation. We have Max Chadwick later on. We'll get you ready for tonight's game and do a little wild card preview in a bit. We also have Howard Beck, but shocking news today, quite frankly, that RSL has moved on from Chicho Arango, their star striker they acquired last year for a $6 million transfer fee, which was a club record. He is headed to San Jose, and RSL did not get a lot of value in return. Tom Bogert's going to join us coming up next. Then a little comedy action with JL Covan, back to football with Max Chadwick. It is a drive on a Friday on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be part of Utah's ESPN radio network. right, we bring on Howard back today. Do a little NBA, do a little jazz NBA. We're back to the college and pro football conversation with Matt Chapek. We're going to say goodnight a little early tonight, in time for Ohio State and Texas. But gotten so keep that in mind. Balls, card week gets rolling. But usually, but a bombshell dropped here locally earlier today, according to Real Salt Lake. Moving on from Chicho to Jose Earthquake. Our next guest covers soccer at a very high level, has been doing it for a long, long time. Pleasure to welcome in Tom Bogle on a Friday. How you doing, man?
What's going on? I'm pretty good. Pretty Chicho and going through this. So glad to hear with you talking.
I appreciate the time. I know you're busy. And same, man. And like ultimately, and there are a lot of levels here, Tom, as you know. Last year, our guy Chicho comes out of the gates and probably had a 15, 16 game stretch that we've never seen here before. Looked like he was going to smash Sabo's record for goals scored. Season, he ended up tying. He was like 15 left. And he, 30. There are some things to understand about the move. What I don't understand is the return. $1.5 million and an spot to be a for. He's right. He's going pretty good. Give me your reaction to the deal. What are your thoughts?
Shock for sure as this one out. Look, I knew that there was a possibility that Rongo would leave the corner. I'd probably that's the probability. This was not where I expected it to be. I assumed very heavily it would be back to Columbia and then the Liga MX or somewhere else. But for him to in Major League Soccer was definitely a shame. They Earthquake to sign Brandon Vasquez from Monterrey, but he went to Austin FC. So they pivoted, and pretty quickly it seems, or maybe that there was talks for a long time, this and where it got sensation. There had been some other big forwards traded in MLS this offseason, the biggest of which was Leonardo Campos. He went from Inter Miami, England Revolution, for $750,000 in. So has much as in MLS. The differences here are Chicho Arango makes a lot more money. He's an older player, so that's why he's a little cheap. But I will say the reaction from the league, including two sources at different Eastern Conference, that can you explain this to me? I don't get it.
And I just want to continue. I'll be the next guy, Tom, to ask you, can you explain this to me? Because I don't get it. Because, look, I mean, and a lot of your points are very well made and certainly founded in evidence because you have a lot of sources. And I have to imagine, and look, I can remember when I got the alert on my phone that Chicho had been suspended for 4 games, and I went, this could derail like the entire season. Because it was some of the most entertaining soccer we had ever seen played here in the market. He and Andres Gomez, who, of course, also has been moved on for a very healthy sum and a very healthy profit. I understand that move. The way they were interchanging, the synergies between the two, when I say it's some of the most entertaining soccer I've ever seen here, Tom, I truly, truly mean it. But the suspension seemed to do something to him. I mean, he wasn't the same player on the field. There are rumblings about whether or not he and his family wanted to stay here. And I have to imagine maybe there was some folks maybe in the ownership suite side of things that wanted this done because Kurt Schmidt is a smart soccer executive. I'm sure he knows he got fleeced. So let me just kind of allow you to expand the conversation. What was the motivation for RSL to essentially do this for what I perceive to be pennies on the dollar?
Everything that you kind of laid out in that question, I think, are fair assumptions and fair starting points. I will start with what I know is described to me as everybody wanted a change of scenery. That goes from ownership, that goes from the club, and that goes to the player's family. So apparently everybody was in agreement, and this is why I figured that this would have been a little bit easier to swallow for fans, a little bit easier to explain to fans, to media, to everybody, if this was back to Atlético Nacional, if this was back to Colombia. It would have been hey, he wanted to go home, we didn't want to stand in his way, all of that. And it's all the same here where, look, again, it was as much Chicho's side as it was the club itself. Both parties were ready for a change of scenery. It's just, it begs a lot more follow-up questions when the move is to the San Jose Earthquakes. It begs more follow-up questions, particularly in regards to that suspension, because you're right. He wasn't the same after he returned from that. Part of that was an injury that he sustained. But even when he was fully fit, and again, maybe we don't know the exact full story of the nature of the injury. Maybe they didn't they didn't lead on how much exactly it was impacting him. But I think that a move like this, with how it kind of came out of nowhere, seemingly, and the money, as you said, I mean, maybe I wouldn't go as far as to say fleece, but I think that could be a fair way to read it. I can't push back on it too much. So all these factors lead a lot of follow-up questions. And again, like you said, it's going to be easy to point and look at the suspension as the demarcation of this was potentially going to be the best individual season in club history before that happened. And after that happened, he was borderline anonymous to the point where he got dropped for the playoff game.
Man, it's just it's so wild. So, of course, there's a massive hole that they're going to have to fill now, and this is not the only move they've made. We'll get to some others, but when they look for his replacement, when RSL looks for the replacement up top to try to get somebody who can provide the same type of production and hopefully this time more consistently, do you think they'll look abroad? Do you think they're going to try to get somebody here local? I mean, they're in CONCACAF, Tom. It starts in a matter of weeks.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. So I'm not exactly sure where the replacement will come from. I'm assuming that Kurt Schmidt and that front office wouldn't rule out any market, whether that's domestic if they could find a deal, or, again, I would probably say more likely abroad just because there's more players abroad and the nature, the cadence of this offseason, the likely forwards to be traded have already been traded. And guess what? One of them is Elias Manuel, who RSL acquired from the New York Red Bulls. I like this move. I think that Elias Manuel was somebody who could use a change of scenery. I think he's a talented player, but when he's your guy, that's probably not the best way to use him or the best way to expect from him to succeed. So I liked it when it was, hey, you have Chicho Arango, you have Elias Manuel. Manuel played plenty of minutes, but he could play with Chicho or he could sit and Chicho could play. Well, now it's just Elias Manuel, and that's not a situation that RSL want to be in or are planning to be in. So they will bring in another player. I'm assuming pretty heavily it's going to be a designated player. Whether that happens in a week, 2 weeks, or even when they're lining up for their first competitive game in the CONCACAF Champions Cup, maybe not, probably not. Immigration stuff takes a while, and that doesn't even count out how long it takes to identify targets or figure out these contracts and transfer fees and everything else. So I wouldn't expect anything to be coming imminently, but I do know that the plan is for the club to bring in the DP.
Tom, they finished third in the West. Now, the playoffs, of course, didn't unfold the way anybody expected. They ran into a bad matchup and didn't play well, and they were ousted in the first round. But it was a good team a year ago, and, Chicho's gone. Anderson Julio's been traded to Dallas. Matt Crooks has been transferred to Hull City. Of course, they moved on from Gomez a year ago. What's the expectation now? Like, my mind is seriously blown, Tom. Like, it's wild that a good team has been broken down like this, and we'll wait and see the reinforcements. But what's left? It's like a skeleton crew from a good team a year ago.
So that's the thing. The evolutions of squads in soccer, they come and go much quicker than the NBA, the NFL, everything else, because of the nature of the global game and the nature of, you look at Andres Gomez. I thought he was very talented in his first, appearances with the club. Obviously, at the beginning of 2024, the first half of the season, he was awesome. That was everything and more of what this club thought they were getting, what the potential could be when everything goes right and everything's perfect and he keeps developing. That is what he was. And guess what? Right when he hit that mark, bang, here come all the offers that you need to accept and move on. So that's just the nature of soccer in the world. Like, these windows for the cores of most teams are small, particularly when you're in the business of signing a really talented young player from South America, because the nature of those moves are, come here, you're going to develop, play well, get paid well in a good spot, and then I promise we're going to sell you on for the good of your career. So that's why Andres Gomez has to go in the summer. That's why Diego Luna, I feel like I get asked about him every transfer window. Hey, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? Where is he going? Nothing yet. Dominic Marchuk, guess what? I really liked him Will we be in the same situation as we were with Andres Gomez in a year from now or 6 months from now? I don't know. But what I will say is there's a hole at center forward, absolutely. But the attacking mid group of Diego Luna, Diego Gonçalves, and Dominic Marchuk, I like that a lot. And then that's going to make it easier on Elijah Manuel and whoever the next center forward is to arrive with Manuel, because these three players are going to create a ton of chances. Dominic Marchuk was showing in his half a season or third of a season, whatever it was, after he came in the summer, that he could score goals and be goal dangerous as well. And again, it is very difficult to come to Major League Soccer as a young player from abroad and be really good really quickly, particularly so when you come into the summer transfer window and you don't have a full preseason. So what Marchuk did at the end of last season, I'm extremely excited to see him for 2025. And Diego Gonçalves, I'm giving him some leeway. Yes, he didn't settle immediately quickly, but as I said, even for an in-prime player, I don't think that you can always expect them to come to Major League Soccer and hit the ground running. With the full preseason, I expect more from him. And then the central midfield group with Brian Ojeda and McAnally, Nelson Palacio, like that's a really strong group as well. So I'm very, very curious to see what exactly this team looks like. But maybe there's, if we want to be optimistic, the inverse of last year. The first half of the season was phenomenal, incredible. And then the team, as you said, kind of got changed, and that's things that happen, and what was in their control and out of their control. So maybe this year the team starts incomplete, and then they build towards the playoffs, and maybe they're peaking at the right time.
So the obvious holes, Tom, of course, are in the attack, whether it's a striker or potentially, and I like Mark Zook as well, and I think with time, the new summer window acquisitions from a year ago will acclimate and play better. So I'm not saying all hope is lost. This was a club last year that had tremendous issues in goal with the veteran Zach McMath, at times making mistakes that you see when there are orange slices involved. And then Gavin Beavers, who everybody loves, but as a prospect, and certainly he's young with a lot of room to grow, but when Gavin had his chance to win the job, he did not perform well either.
Yeah.
Do you think they look to do something in goal?
I absolutely think they do, and know that they are looking. So that is another place where they could upgrade. And again, like, it's not to take from Moneyball, the Billy Bean, Brad Pitt movie about the Oakland A's, but they need to, in the aggregate, is where they need the improvement. So hey, maybe the attack won't be quite as pyrotechnic as it was in the first half of last season, but maybe the defense will be quite better, and there will be less mistakes from the goalkeeping group. Again, like you said, there were just frankly some schoolboy mistakes from Zach McMath and Gavin Beavers. And look, like, I give credit to any team playing young players, and Real Salt Lake are absolutely one of the teams in the league that are at the forefront of trying to develop and play young players. Gavin Beavers, I think he's going to be an excellent goalkeeper one day. It is difficult to win at that position with a teenager. They have to be something super, super special. Gaga Sonina, Chicago Fire, he was special. He was bad during his minutes in Major League Soccer, or extremely inconsistent, to say the least. And that worked out for Chicago. That worked out for Gaga. They got the big move to Chelsea, all of that. Chicago didn't do anything when Gaga Sonina was there. It is really difficult, particularly at that position. And then center back would be the other one, to have a teenager, a young player. But goalkeeper, the idea is if you win the starting job, you're playing every single minute. And young players by nature are inconsistent because they're continuing to develop and continue to grow. So your point here about the goalkeeping situation here, yeah, I really do expect them to bring in a goalkeeper.
All right, you referenced that everybody asks you about Diego Luna, and I'll add my name to that list as well because, Tom, I have simply begrudgingly, just for context for you, my sport background was the classic American sports. I played basketball and football and baseball, lacrosse, all that stuff, and that was how I kind of made my way through the business. And so, RSL comes here in 2004, so 20-plus years of soccer here. And so I've really leaned into the game and enjoy it in a way I never thought I would. And I've begrudgingly been drug along on this whole, like, we are a develop and sale player situation. I want Andres Gomez to stay here for 10 years. And, but I get it. I understand why the club has leaned into it, and I understand how it can breed success. I don't love it, but I get it. And I don't want Diego to leave, but it feels like every time I open up a report of some kind, Diego is linked to some sort of transfer. So what do you think the future holds for this talented young attacking player we have here in Salt Lake?
Yes, I mean, his future is in Europe, absolutely. And that was part of the reason that RSL were able to sign him. They weren't the only club trying to sign him, but part of it was, hey, we have with the Blitzer Group even more connections to Europe. Look, we think that you're a phenomenal player, whether we have common ownership in Europe or not, you're going to make it there. But here's a pathway. Here's what makes it easier for you. And you can look at our track record of developing young players, playing young players, and then selling them on. So that was all part of the recruiting pitch. So it is absolutely in his future. And then even on that front, like, to tie it back around to Chicho Arango, like, Chicho was supposed to be that guy, man. And, like, that's where I gave ownership a ton of credit. Like, they spent club record fee of $6 million to sign him. That was a 28-year-old player at the time. That wasn't somebody that they were trying to buy then to sell on for more profit, or somebody that they were going to buy to try to develop. No. Chicho was supposed to be the control in this group. Chicho was supposed to be the one that, yeah, we're still going to bring through Diego Luna and Andres Gomez and then Dominic Marchuk and then whoever they'll replace Luna with whenever he inevitably ends up in Europe. But guess what? We're going to have, one of the best center forwards in MLS, as we're going to be competitive and lean on him, and then the pieces around him might change. So, again, they tried it that way. Diego Gonzalez is somebody else, probably to a little bit of lesser extent just because of the fee that was coming in. But that's still a player that he's signing to be here for the rest of his prime. That's not a guy that it's hey, we'll bring him in and maybe we can turn a profit on him in 2 years. So they're trying to strike that balance. It has proved a little bit elusive. And look, man, maybe I'm being too kind, but like I don't blame them on this Chicho Arango story. From, again, I know that you are as plugged in as anybody with this club as well. So, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I almost feel for them and just how this is kind of derailed and had to change.
Yeah, and a fan base that was so excited about what I perceive to be the biggest individual star we've ever had here. All due respect to some World Cup legends like Beckerman and Raimondo, but Chicho, There was something different about him when he was right. But your point is well taken about just a marriage that felt like it's over, and probably best for everyone to move on. For context, Seattle sent $2 million, Leo Chu, an international spot, to Dallas for Jesus Ferreira. I hate to keep going back to the point. I am stunned that all they received was $1.5 million and an international roster spot when Seattle sent all of that to Dallas for Ferreira, if that makes sense.
Hey, man, I agree with you there. I think that part of that is the musical chairs. Then the music stopped and all the chairs were filled, right? Again, New England were a team that were in for a forward. They traded all that money for Campana. Seattle Sounders pivoted quickly, and they liked what Jesus Ferreira can do because he doesn't need to play as a center forward. He can play on the wing and interchange with some of the other players in Seattle. So there just kind of wasn't anybody else who was going to be bidding this money. I guess you could try to turn to Dallas, but Dallas already have Pedro Musa. I don't think that Chicho Arango and Pedro Musa would have been a great fit together. So you just kind of look around the league, and San Jose was it, and you thought that San Jose might be desperate, but hey, again, if people like, hey, I'd like to think I'm pretty good at my job, but I know the people in front offices around the league, they can find out information on their own as well. So I'm certain that they were hearing the same things I was about Chicho needs to leave and that marriage needs to be over. So I think San Jose went into those negotiations knowing, hey, yeah, we're desperate for a center forward, but we think that you're more desperate to let him go.
Oof. Well, Tom, it's been a pleasure. I've been an admirer of your work for a long, long time. So keep that great work up, and we'll see where RSL goes from here, man. Thanks for the time. Happy Friday, okay?
I appreciate the kind words. I look forward to being on again soon.
All right, Tom Boger, one of the best in the business. He breaks pretty much, well, for me, I don't follow all of the soccer news breakers in the world, but MLS, U.S. men's national team news, at Tom Bogert is where you find him on Twitter if you're interested for breaking news. So if you're just hopping in your car, turning on the radio, if you are an RSL fan, and yes, football fan, sorry, but massive news broke earlier today that Real Salt Lake has moved on from Chicho Arango, one of the most talented players we've ever had here. He is now a member of the San Jose Earthquakes, and RSL receives $1.5 million in what's called general allocation money and an open international spot in exchange. It does not seem like a lot from my vantage point. We're going to have an RSL front office member on Monday, either Kurt Schmidt or Jason Kreis. We'll get more information on exactly how all this went down. Tom Bogert today, brought to you by our friends at Overtime Cards and Collectibles. My good friends Michelle and Chris, just the best people at Overtime Cards and Collectibles in Sandy. It's the best spot for all of your football, basketball, hockey, MMA, and even Pokemon trading cards. You can buy all your favorites there, from rare sports cards to local legends and hard-to-find Pokemon cards. 2025, guys, start a new and fun hobby, collecting cards over with our good friends at Overtime. Check them out online at overtimecardsandcollectibles.com, where you can buy and trade. All right, one of our favorites, Howard Beck, joins us coming up next. Do a little NBA. JL Covan, the triumphant return of JL to the show today We'll move over to some more football with Max Chadwick. Don't forget, we're going to say goodnight at 5:30 in time for the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State and Texas. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. the hippest NBA writer around. Howard Beck on a Friday. Howard, happy Friday, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. I will continue my streak of hipsterness by saying thank you for bringing me in to Neutral Milk Hotel. That was fabulous. Appreciate it. Glad you got the Crustables down without gagging on the air.
My goal is one day to bring you in with a bump you don't know. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do that because while we exist in somewhat of the same musical stratosphere, I do not have the knowledge you do. So that at some point, Howard, I'm going to bring you in with a bump that you don't recognize.
It'll happen. You know what? Like throw on like country music or hip hop, and I'll be completely lost.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Fair enough. You know, we've been talking about this week. Of course, that big OKC Cleveland game, which was awesome. And, you know, Donovan Mitchell's second year, Howard, here in Salt Lake, as you remember, that was a fascinating team to watch. And they advanced to the postseason. And Donovan was the main scoring cog as a second-year player for a playoff team that beat Oklahoma City with Paul George and Melo and Russell Westbrook. And I can remember thinking, I was covering the team at the time. I was with the old station over there. We were the Jazz broadcast partner. I remember just thinking, like, what? This is such great news that Donovan is getting this experience as a second-year player, and, man, this is going to pay off in 4 or 5 years. The problem is it's now paying off for Cleveland, not Utah. Now, he didn't have the greatest game against OKC, but are you seeing some maturation, some growth from Donovan as far as what he's been able to do for Cleveland this year, even though the numbers are relatively similar?
There definitely is. And the numbers are similar, but different in some significant ways. He's actually averaging 18 shots a game, which is almost a full 2 field goal attempts less than a year ago in Cleveland, and more than 2 less than his first year in Cleveland, and down from where he was his last couple of years in Utah. He's definitely ceding more responsibility and empowering his backcourt mate Darius Garland. And if you recall, in all the conversations we've had ever since Mitchell landed in Cleveland, my concern was always, there were multiple concerns about fit, but one of them was 2 guys who were both used to having the ball in their hands a lot, ball dominant guards, both the guys used to, creating and scoring a lot, having a lot of responsibility. Garland had just become an all-star right before Donovan Mitchell got there. And I thought, well, man, is that going to impede his growth? How's that going to sit with him? Can they figure it out? Is it just going to be my turn, your turn basketball? Because that's never great. And I do think that all of those things were part of the, period of adjustment in their first 2 seasons together in Cleveland. And then there, were injuries along the way too, that kind of got in the way of them finding that chemistry. And I still had my doubts. And a lot of people around the league had their doubts that 2 smaller guards, both not great defenders, both ball dominant. Is it going to work? Is it just inevitable that they're going to have to break this up? And that was why everybody thought that Donovan would eventually ask for a trade and not sign the extension. And lo and behold, he signed the extension, stayed put. Darius Garland blossomed anyway. And here they are. They're on pace for 70-plus wins. So a lot of credit to Donovan Mitchell for being able to, empower his younger teammates, not just Garland, but Mobley, and figure out the right balance. And, yeah, on a night when he shot terribly against one of the best teams in the league in Oklahoma, they were still able to win that because everybody else was great, and Donovan did what he needed to do. Still hit a big 3 down in the last 4 or 5 minutes. But yeah, I think these are big steps for him.
So, the narrative that Donovan doesn't get it done in the postseason isn't entirely fair. I mean, I watched him drop half 100 against Denver in the bubble. And I already referenced that series against OKC when his star kind of burst onto the national scene here in Salt Lake. But it's also fair to say that the playoff success has not necessarily been in lockstep with how dynamic he's been in the regular season. So what sort of answers do you think, or I should say, what sort of questions come spring does Donovan need to answer in order for people to kind of get rid of the narrative that this is a great paper tiger regular season player that doesn't necessarily step it up come playoff time?
Yeah, I feel like that is partially about him, and it's partially just going to be about the Cavaliers in general. Like, if you look at the Utah years, and this is no disrespect to those Jazz teams or to the folks who put together those Jazz teams, but they just did not have the kind of firepower or talent, I don't think, that the Cavaliers now have. So, one, this is the best team he's been part of, and even though this roster's been largely the same in Cleveland since he got there, because some of those guys were really young, Garland and Mobley in particular, and because they needed to fill some spots along the way, getting Strus and Niang and all these guys, like, this is the best version of the Cavs that he's been with, and I think this is the best team he's been part of, period. And so the question people have about the Cavaliers now is, are they maybe a paper tiger, right? Like, is this just going to be one of those great regular season teams that can't do it in the postseason? And the reason people still ask that is because they have fallen short in each of his first couple seasons in Cleveland. You only answer it by answering it, right? Like, there's no magic formula here for how you dispel that. You do it by making a deeper run. You do it by getting at least to the second round, but more likely the conference finals. And especially if they do end up winning 70 games or in the high 60s, anything over 65, anything over 60 in this league, but especially over 65, it's championship or bust at that point. I mean, we know how much the Warriors got clowned for setting the regular season record with 73 wins and then blowing a 3-1 lead in the finals. There were circumstances, but still, the results are the results. So, yeah, that is the target the Cavs have now put on their back, and the bar that they've raised for themselves is, if they keep up at this pace, it's going to be championship or bust. Like, it won't be good enough just to be a darling or a dark horse anymore and make, like, you know, a run to the conference finals. Like, no, anything short of the finals now or a championship will probably be considered a failure and a disappointment. So, you know, everything that we're seeing now, Donovan being selfless, I think, Garland being selfless, all of them, a lot of ball movement, a lot of player movement too, just within the offense. I think Kenny Atkinson has done a phenomenal job in just kind of bringing a little bit more movement and dynamism to that offense. The defense was already there. GB Bickerstaff deserves a lot of credit for getting them to that point. But they just need to keep doing what they're doing. And are they good enough to beat the Celtics 4 out of 7? I don't know. We'll find out in the spring. Could somebody else trip them up? The Knicks, the Bucks, the Sixers, if they ever get healthy. We'll see. But the Cavs are legit. They're absolutely legit. They're absolutely a contender.
Yeah, I think it's time. Just look, they're freaking 33-4. You know, like at what point do we stop poking holes and just sit back and kind of tip the cap? All right, like, I think we've seen enough to indicate that they at least, and you know the deal with the league. Like, you just want, if you're a front office, if you're building a team, you just want a shot. You just want people to say, you know what, you got a shot. And if you have a shot, you're in a very, very rarefied air group of teams. And I think it's just time to say, like, yeah, they got a shot. Like, you know, Quinn's best teams here, when they were the best regular season team one year, and I think they had the most regular season wins over the course of like a 3 or 4 year period. I don't know, Howard, that I ever thought that they were going to win a championship, but for a couple of years, I just was like, you know what, they got a shot. And, you know, if LeBron James isn't born in your city, you know, just having a shot in a place like Cleveland or Salt Lake without LeBron on your roster is almost all you can ask for. Yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, you know, it's interesting. One of the discussions that's come out of this whole emergence of the Cavaliers is, you know, it's about team building and about what you do in a smaller cold weather market. How do you win? How do you contend? How do you compete with the bigger markets? And under this CBA, where actually everybody's kind of limited in how many stars they can accumulate, you know, what's the path? What's the right team build? And I think, you know, here's the Cavaliers who, yeah, they win a championship because they were able to get LeBron to come back. And, yeah, that never happens if LeBron's not born in Akron and all the ties to the region. And now what they've done, huge credit to Kobe Altman and that front office, is, you know, they drafted well with Garland and Mobley. They were smart to get in on the Rockets-Nets trade with James Harden, which netted them Jared Allen and Karis LeVert to be part of that trade. And those guys are both still huge parts of the rotation. And obviously, Jared Allen, you know, starter, and Karis LeVert, sixth man. And then they go out and spend every asset they've got to pluck Donovan Mitchell at a time when everybody thought it was going to be New York or bust for Donovan. And so I think what's interesting about it, what's fun about it, And what's encouraging for other small markets is like, look, every championship build is different. Every contender build is different. But like, I think theirs is one that you can look at and say, like, they did this really well. They did it smartly. They built organically first, got to be just good enough that adding Donovan Mitchell to put them over the top, feels like the right move. Feels like a move that might actually win them a championship. The question I still have is, Donovan Mitchell is not at the level of LeBron, Steph, Giannis, Jokic, those guys, right? We have tiers of stars in this league, and most championship teams are built around one of those absolute elite of the elite, guys who are in the perennial MVP conversation. And Donovan has not been, and it's not a knock on him to say that he's not in that echelon, because that's an all-time echelon. But maybe they do it. Maybe they win it with this ensemble, and I think that would be fascinating.
So out this way, I mean, one loss in the regular season is not going to tell a story about who OKC is not, because every time I dial in on them, I'm just wildly impressed. Is a team like Cleveland the type of team that they could struggle with, though? I mean, they still have to get healthy, and when they have their 7-footers available, Hartenstein and Chet consistently, we'll see what that looks like. But did Cleveland provide maybe a little bit of a sneak snapshot peek on as far as a team that might make OKC a little bit vulnerable come playoff time?
I don't know, and it'll be interesting because they're rematched this coming week, right? They're going to play again very, very soon, I think on Thursday. And so let's see how the rematch goes, because we might be asking very different questions if the Thunder somehow smoked the Cavs that night. Then we'll be like, oh, well, maybe the Cavs didn't have the answers, and have we now seen how what you need to do to beat the Cavs? This whole thing could be reversed. I do think that the toughest thing in terms of evaluating the Thunder right now, including in the game that we just saw against Cleveland or any of the other bigger matchups they've had recently, is that, Chet's not there. Caruso didn't play the other night either. Caruso and Hartenstein were their big offseason pickups, and Hartenstein was out while Chet was playing, and then Hartenstein comes back just as Chet goes down. We have not seen this team at full strength, and they're still amazing. They're still awesome. They're still absolutely dominant. And, I'm going to assume full health for them by the spring. And at that point, now you've got this big front line, if you want to, play Chet and Hartenstein side by side. And I just don't even know who can go up against them. I mean, I picked the Thunder as my preseason champion. We're all guessing, of course, but I figured if it's Oklahoma and Boston in the finals, Oklahoma's younger, maybe a little deeper, sprier, and Boston might be just fatigued after back-to-back years of going to the finals, and the top of the East is tougher now. So it's just a guess, but I think what the Thunder have in terms of size and versatility, defense from almost everybody in the rotation, I just think is going to be really tough to beat.
Let me a little non sequitur here, but the Pelicans have suspended Zion Williamson for one game, violation of team rules. Apparently, he was late for a plane flight, and I'm not going to sit here and bash on somebody for being late. That's not what I'm going to ask you, but Howard, you remember Zion was kind of like the first social media phenom, YouTube phenom, when he was a youngster in high school and AAU. And, everybody was beyond excited about watching him at Duke and watching him in college. And it felt like he was. And when he came into the league, with the Jazz being in Salt Lake, I talked a lot about, the Pelicans are going to be a team you got to watch out for, because they seem to have that generational talent that if they can build around him, they could have something pretty special. And they've had horrible luck, and certainly Zion's been hurt. But are we approaching the point with this kid where you're kind of like wondering whether or not he will ever show us what it looks like when he's fully baked and fully engaged?
I think people around the league have been asking that question for the last couple of years, because he's never healthy. He's often not in shape. There's been a lot of things both on and off the court that show a level of immaturity that I think has been concerning. And this incident now just feels like another piece of that. And it's not just missed or was late for one flight. My buddy Chris Haynes, posting on Blue Sky, said, according to sources, Zion has been late for multiple practices this season, on top of being late for the team's flight to Philadelphia these incidents led to the 1-game suspension. So it's more of a habitual tardiness, which just shows a lack of maturity and a lack of responsibility, lack of conscience, basically, of being a professional and understanding what your obligations are to your teammates and your coaches and the organization. Now, the statement they put out, Zion apologizes profusely and says he understands and he's going to be accountable and all that. That's fine, but like, come on, like how many years do we have to go through this, or do the Pelicans have to go through this, I should say, before you say, well, maybe this is just who he is. And look, guys can get it. Some guys get it at 20, 25, 30. Maybe the light bulb goes off at some point. But I think the combination of his habits, his injuries, which may be influenced by his habits of just not being in shape, all of that combines to make people seriously wonder about his longevity and the ability to build a viable team around him. And it's the most fascinating question you can ask. And ESPN tried to tackle it on ESPN.com a few weeks back, which is, what would you do if you're the Pelicans and like, would you trade him? Could you trade him? Who's acquiring him? And he's got this contract with all of these conditions built in, where if he doesn't meet certain weight and body fat requirements, you don't owe him anything. And I think it's a games requirement too. So they're already at a point where the Pelicans, if they wanted to, could waive him and be completely off the hook of his contract as if he were a free agent. But do you do that? Like there's a risk in doing it, obviously. And, he might go somewhere else, sign a minimum contract, stay healthy, and lead somebody else deep in the playoffs or to a title. And then you're stuck with that for the rest of your career in New Orleans, if you're the team that let him go. So I don't know. But that's, if you asked the other 29 GMs, would you acquire him? I mean, obviously the question would be what does it cost to get him? But like, do you want to bank if you're the GM, do you want to bank your career on him? Do you want to bank your team's fate on him? I don't think there's a lot of, teams out there that would say absolutely yes. I think they would all be very nervous.
That's really interesting, because when he's healthy and when he's right, he's so good. I mean, he really is, in my opinion, talent-wise, production-wise, and the problem is it doesn't seem like he's ever healthy, and it doesn't seem like he's ever right. But in the minor stretches that he puts together when he is ready to roll, it feels like rarefied air type talent. And maybe it is a change of scenery. I mean, do you leave space, Howard, covering this league for as long as you have, of the potential of him waking up at some point? Or do you feel like it is time for maybe a change of scenery to see what it looks like under a different staff?
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's had a few different coaches already in New Orleans, but it's all been in New Orleans. Does he need a change of scenery? Does he need to just, snap out of it and just be a better, more responsible professional? The question you're asking about, like, is it possible? Of course, it's still possible. Like, yeah, I'm one who, like, I'm never ready to just completely write a guy off. The potential for him to be an absolute superstar and even an all-timer is still there. He's still pretty young. But, every year that goes by when the pattern is repeating makes it harder to believe in the possibility of a different version of him. And if somebody wanted to make the case that the Pelicans should just move on, I wouldn't argue that strenuously against it. I think there's a really strong case that if you could get a decent package for him, you should. But again, whether it's the Pelicans trying to figure out what the right value is for him, or whether it's a team that wanted to trade for him trying to figure it out, I don't know that anybody can assess that real well, because the track record is what it is.
Yep. Hard to argue with any of that. The Miami Heat were in town last night to play the Jazz, and I will not ask you about the lead guard tendencies of Isaiah Collier, but I will take the opportunity, since the Heat were in town, and it's the second time the Jazz have played the Heat over the past 10 days, to get your pulse on how this Jimmy Butler situation plays out. And, Miami has several reasons to not do a deal. I mean, when you dig into the potential cap ramifications, I understand if they're going to kind of long game this. And of course, he's really good, so you need to get value in return. It does feel untenable. He's been suspended now for a minute. How do you think this plays out down in South Beach?
I do not have a good guess on this. The seemingly obvious thing is, well, the suspension is going to come to an end soon, and it's really awkward to bring him back. So, ergo, you got to trade him sooner than later. Just make a deal. Just get him off the books. Just go. But you can't. Like, the Heat have held the line up until now for a reason, which is that they don't want to take on long-term money. They also don't want to pay Jimmy Butler long-term money, which is why he's pouting in the first place. And they're only going to make a deal if it's the right deal. And this is the Miami Heat. This is one of the franchises with very strong convictions in this league. And so if they say we're not taking a bad deal with long-term money just to get rid of a headache, believe them. So, Jimmy still has a market out there. There are still plenty of teams that could benefit from him, but any of those teams that were looking to acquire him are, having to ask themselves the same questions that the Heat are, which is how much is Jimmy worth at age 35? 36 next season when he could be making $52 million if he opts into his contract. And he's going to want an extension at a really high number, possibly at a max number, which is why Miami balked and why Jimmy is upset. So the next team has to deal with all that. And, how much are you willing to give up to acquire him at this age with the miles he's got on him, with the injury history he has? And, he's a guy who's played, maybe 2/3 to 3/4 of the season every year for the last however many years. Like, he's always going to miss, 15, 20 games. So it's tough. There's no easy answer here for the Heat. There's no easy answer for any of the teams that are looking to acquire him. And, yeah, there's a nightmare scenario lingering there where they don't make a deal and they can't just suspend him indefinitely. And the new CBA doesn't allow you to just tell a guy to go home by mutual agreement because it violates the player participation policy. So then what do? Do you play him again? Does he play at a level that he should, or, because it seemed like he was going through the motions a little bit right before they suspended him. This is a mess all the way around.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. All right, before I set you loose, since it is that time of year with that February trade deadline looming, any other deals you're hearing out there of note? Teams that are actively buying, teams that are actively selling? Are we in for a active or a quiet trade deadline?
Nobody knows. It's one of those situations where now that the new CBA is in full effect with the second apron and all these teams that have all these limitations and teams that are virtually hard capped at one apron or the other, there's plenty of desire out there to make moves, right? But I don't know that the math is going to work and that the cap rules are going to allow it. So I think a lot of people are bracing for a quiet trade deadline, maybe some minor deals. There's always some minor deals, but in terms of like a Jimmy Butler deal or a Brandon Ingram deal, he's been hurt anyway, but a Zach LaVine deal, are any big names going to go? It seems unlikely. But, front offices get really creative in this league. And if you can rope in a third team that has cap room like Brooklyn or Detroit, where you can dump some salary and give them the incentive with some picks, maybe you can get some stuff done. But I don't think anybody can predict how this next few weeks is going to go with regard to the trade deadline.
Yep, that time of year, man. Well, look, I appreciate your time on a Friday. Have a great weekend, and we'll do it again soon, okay?
Thanks, Spence. Talk to you soon.
All right, great. Howard Beck from The Ringer has a great podcast, great NBA podcast. You can get him on Twitter. I don't think he's on Twitter much anymore, but he is on Blue Sky. At Howard Beck is where you find him. And the podcast is called The Real Ones Pod. Former Jazzman Raja Bell is on the podcast with Howard. So worth your time to check out. NBA Daily Assist Style on a Friday, brought to you by Bout Time Pub, Utah's premier sports bar with amazing food and killer cocktails. You can make Bout Time your place for sports or even brunch. All food is made from scratch. And the new mocktails for those of you who don't participate in alcohol. More TVs than tables. All Bout Time TVs have their own receiver, so we're going to have all the games going live. Free high-speed Wi-Fi makes it a great place to work from home. So keep Bout Time in mind for your upcoming holiday parties next year. It's never too early. Porter, it's never too early to plan for the holidays.
Did we not? I swear to you that I pulled that and crumbled it up. Did that not happen like 2 days ago?
Look, this is not your fault. This is me needing to read copy before I Ron Burgundy it on air. Just don't give me a San Diego line on any of my copy, please.
I have long thought about doing that. Maybe not.
Don't do that.
Maybe not that particular one. but something funny along those lines.
That wouldn't be funny.
You read that copy when you had a guest in studio, and I came in and crumbled it up. So we got some nefarious activity going on here.
It says keep Out Time Pub in mind for your holiday parties.
President's Day.
Right. Yeah,
coming up.
That's what I'm saying. It's never too early to plan. It also says it's fall and almost winter on this copy. So let's go ahead and try to be better. Let's get some new copy. That's all I'm saying. Because it's very much not fall, almost winter. It's very much winter.
It is in the doldrums of that.
Bottom line is this. Bout Time Pub is a great spot. Okay, their locations are in Ogden, Layton, West Valley. What is wrong with me? West Jordan, Sandy, Tooele, Harriman, Bluffdale, Lehigh, and Vineyard, celebrating their 15-year anniversary. In-house smoked wings, fresh, made from scratch food.
16-year anniversary?
Brunch available on the weekends from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., I believe, including a Build Your Own Bloody Mary bar. They show every UFC event. Celebrate the new year. Just kidding. That's not on this. More information online at bouttimepub.com. Ridiculous. 2 hours down, 2 hours to go. A little comic relief on a Friday comes your way. Coming up next, if you've never heard J.L. Covan on the show, you're going to want to stay tuned for that. We're going to preview tonight's game that you can hear on this station between Ohio State and Texas with Max Chadwick. We'll say goodnight at 5:30 instead of the usual 6 o'clock to get you to kick off on the Cotton Bowl. So keep it right here on ESPN 700. Don't forget, about 90 minutes-ish from right now, we will send you over to the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State and Texas tonight. So stay tuned for that. We're going to bring in Max Chadwick for a comprehensive preview of that game coming up in just a little bit. But let's take a little break, okay? It's Friday. Can have a little fun on a Friday. We've been pretty football-centric, did a little hoops with Howard Beck. And it's been a little while, but if you're a fan of the show, first of all, thank you. How are you? Second of all, you know our next guest. You love our next guest. He is one of one. He is an attorney from New Jersey who's also a stand-up comedian and a fan of the Utah Jazz. Go find one other person like that. It's not possible. JL Covan on a Friday afternoon. JL, happy Friday, sir. How you been?
Oh, very good. Happy Friday. Happy New Year. Very good to talk with you.
So let's, as I referenced from the first time I met you and became familiar with your work, you are a very unique individual, and you are a Jazz fan. You are an East Coaster, and they're finally leaning into this tank thing, JL, and hopefully it pays off with Cooper Flagg. But how engaged are you watching Jazz games this year, if at all?
It's, they drove me into the arms, honestly, of the New York Rangers a little bit. I've been watching a lot more hockey than I've ever watched before because I needed, and as soon as I started watching the Rangers, they went from best record in the league in one season to worst record in their division. So it might be me. Ainge might want to trade me to another franchise. But I think I've been watching now because I just want to see the young players. Like, I'm not watching for wins. I'm just watching to stay familiar. But it's tough because I just think, all due respect to the front office, I think the last two seasons until this year, doing the mid-season tank is the worst of all possibilities. Where it's like, hey, it looks like they're overachieving under Will Hardy and Lauri Markkanen. All right, now let's trade some people then. Let's try to get that 10th pick. It doesn't. So, and they did it like 2 years in a row.
Yeah. So
like this year, I think they finally have gotten to that level where we'll just miss Cooper Flagg and Ron Harper's son. When those envelopes are revealed and we get the 4th pick, it will all be worth it.
Oh, man. Oh, and I'm not saying you're wrong. It's like we just need a little lady luck out here. We've never had it.
Yes.
We only drop. We even dropped last year. But it does feel like maybe this organization is finally due for the frozen envelope, this time to say the Utah Jazz.
Yeah, come on. Let's. I think so. New York, Salt Lake City, those are both markets that the league wants to dominate. So to me, whoever they get, I hope it's somebody strong. I will just be terrified if Oklahoma City gets any more luck.
Yeah.
And they end up with Cooper Flagg. It's like, we don't know what to do. We have to trade one of our future all-stars because there's just not enough room on the roster.
Right. No, unfortunately, hey, I know you've told the story before, but it has been a while since we've had you on, and certainly radio audiences change and we have new listeners. So let's get the JL Covan lawyer, New Jersey, Utah Jazz fan origin story.
Sure. So, growing up in New York, I moved to Jersey right before the pandemic. But growing up in New York, my whole family were Knicks fans, still are Knicks fans, and I guess I just wanted to be different. And I remember looking in the sporting news, which for the younger listeners, there used to be things called papers and magazines, and they used to print things. And you'd see the stats for the NBA players, and I would just be like, okay, I know who Michael Jordan is. He was always at the top of the scoring. And I'd be like, who's K. Malone? Because this guy's right under Jordan every time, so he's got to be good. And then assists, I'd be like, well, I know who Magic Johnson is. Who's this guy Jay Stockton that's always ahead of Magic Johnson in assists? So I ended up watching the Jazz, and I'm also biracial in case there's any monoracial Jersey lawyer Utah Jazz fan out there, just to throw in another detail about my life. And the joke is sort of seeing Karl Malone and John Stockton cooperate so well together while watching my Haitian father and Irish mother constantly argue. I said, hey, this is more the spirit I'm looking for, the kind of team spirit I like to see between black people and white people. And then I became a lifelong Utah Jazz fan.
There you go. How have you digested? Because it's been a big topic on the show. Donovan Mitchell, as you remember, year 2 out here. The main.
I don't hear a lot about him anymore. How's he doing these days?
He seems to be thriving, JL, and but my sincere hope was the experience he had as the main scoring cog for a playoff basketball team year 2 would pay off in 4 or 5 years, and it has, but not
really
here.
Has.
But not here. But not here.
But when you love somebody, it's like that Adele song, I hope I find someone like you. That's how I feel about it. Look at him having success. Let's just maybe one day it'll happen again. You don't trade a 13 pick when you're the Utah Jazz. Karl Malone, Donovan Mitchell. That is just fact. I am still a big believer that bringing in a new coach like Will Hardy and maybe us trading all our draft picks for somebody like Lauri Markkanen and adding him to Gobert and Mitchell and just putting them in a room and saying, you guys are under contract for 3 more years. Figure it out.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yep.
Would have been worth it. I get it. They went a different direction, and I don't think it's unreasonable to break it up. But the problem is when Anthony Edwards makes the leap, when Donovan Mitchell proves himself to be a top 10 talent in the league, that treasure trove of draft picks end up being, in the 20s instead of like that Brooklyn. I think Ainge thought he was going to replicate the heist of the Brooklyn Nets that brought them Tatum and Brown. Instead, I don't think it's going to bring us that. I'll just leave it at that without insulting anybody.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't appear like it as of now because Cleveland's pick might be the last pick in the draft, and Minnesota's pick probably will be, 18, 19, 20. They have to rely on their own pick, and hopefully, as we talked about, we'll see a little Lady Luck and see Cooper Flagg here next year and potentially, get back to winning ways at some point. Last Jazz thing, though, because now, being a fan for as long as you've been, this is brand new. We have been incredibly spoiled. Now, we've had a couple dips here or there, but they usually last a year or two. And then, they draft Darren Williams and they sign Carlos Boozer and boom. Or they, lose Hayward, draft Mitchell, Gobert, boom. This is still 2-3 years away at the earliest, in my opinion, of this team being back in even non-play-in territory where they might be capturing one of the top 8 seeds. And this will be the first time that we will have experienced probably 5 to 6 years of losing basketball. It just goes to show you, JL, that we've all been spoiled as Jazz fans.
Absolutely. But I will say this, and a shout out to Andre Kirilenko, because when I thought I was going to fade as a Jazz fan after Malone and Stockton were done, Kirilenko was really the bridge for a couple of years.
Yep.
Just such an interesting, unique player that I was like, I'll stick with the Jazz. I got somebody to hang my hat on. And to me, what bothered me about the Ainge era so far was that if you look, you could say we were lucky, but you could also say a culture, a good front office will draft talent and find that Mitchell at 13, that Gobert at 27. That you don't have to go get the Giannis Antetokounmpo, 15th pick, Kawhi Leonard, 15th pick. So it's the Jazz. I think what I loved about them, and still, I'm still a fan, but for literally like decades, they did it the sort of old-fashioned way and had enough confidence in their drafting and their player development and their culture that I could be like, yes, I'm not about ring chasing. I'd love it if Malone and Stockton had won a ring. I'd love it if Mitchell and Gobert were still in Utah. But it's more about, are you, sending the message that we compete every night? Like when I watched that team under Will Hardy's first year, Williams College basketball alum, by the way, that's we share that.
That's right.
What I liked about it was I said, I don't care about getting the number 1 pick. This team could make the playoffs. That sends also a message about culture to free agents. That's how you maybe get the next Carlos Boozer if there's a blind owner that you can trick. You get, you do certain things that send a message of like, this is a good place to be. And then, you don't have to tank because look at Philadelphia. they invented the modern tank, and they collected a bunch of high draft picks and talented players and have yet to win a title and probably won't under the Embiid era. So this idea of like abandoning your 4-decade-long culture to play the new game, which is still not a guarantee, that's what really bothered me, because I could look at a 38-win team and be like, man, they overachieved. I'm excited for what pieces they can add. But when a team sort of tanks 3 years in a row and has to like reset the tank each year, that's more disheartening.
Yep. Yeah. Well said. Well said. All right. Moving away from the Jazz, every time I have you on, I always like to talk to you about your craft. JL is a stand-up comic, and we're hoping that is his full-time gig soon. Obviously, everyone's got to pay the bills, but I thought about you recently because I can remember one of our first conversations. I asked you who you think, the greatest stand-up comic of all time is, or just, some ideas about what a Mount Rushmore would look like or whatever the corny thing is. And I remember you said Greg Giraldo is one of your favorites. And it struck me because I only knew Greg through the roasts. I did not know any of his stand-up. And Hulu has this series called The Dark Side of Comedy. And I saw they did one on Greg, and I watched it 2 weeks ago. Zero clue that we're talking Columbia undergrad, Harvard, JD, graduated from, the Ivy League institutions. And, and zero clue, simply, you could tell, the snapshots during the roast, you could tell that he was bright, he was quick. You could tell that he had juice, but I didn't realize really what a powerhouse he was as a stand-up comic. And I learned about all these things, and you were the first person I thought of. I thought it was a really fascinating watch.
Yeah, I mean, Greg Giraldo is the guy who, I've always sort of dreamed of being, and the business has changed, obviously, and I've carved out some niches in the kind of impersonation space. But he's always been the guy that I sort of wanted to be in terms of, that smart but accessible, edgy but not edgelord kind of comedian. I think he walked the line perfectly, where he had the respect of like the trolls in the back of the room, but also, the thoughtful people as well. He just kind of walked that line perfectly. And it's a big loss. I mean, it's crazy to think. I turned 45 last year, and I believe he passed away at 44, which is a strange feeling to be like, the first, half of my comedy career, I'm looking up to this giant, and now I've been a comedian longer than like he was a comedian when I started, if that makes sense. So it's a crazy thing.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately tragic, at the end. I wonder if I could ask you more of a macro question, because I haven't watched all of them. But, there's like the litany of SNL cast members that died far too young. And I think there are 3 seasons of this series. And I really am fascinated with the craft. I have so much respect for people that have the courage to do it. I'm wondering why you feel like this business inspires these bright lights who shine very, very brightly and then burn out way too quickly.
Yeah, I mean, and right now all I'm thinking is, well, at least I know one more TV credit I could probably lock up if I'm willing to take the risk.
Oh my God.
But no, in all seriousness, I think what I've experienced, like I can only speak to myself. Like I got into comedy because honestly, I was sort of bummed out. I mean, depressed is probably the right word, but I wouldn't want to use that without a diagnosis. But I was in the dumps in the middle of law school, like living on my own, long-distance relationship, and I kind of just needed a hobby. And I gravitated to trying stand-up comedy at some open mics, and I really enjoyed it. And I think what happens, like with a lot of performing, whether it be music, sports, whatever, when you get that adrenaline rush, it wears off. My first 5-6 years doing comedy, I would leave stage after a good show and feel like high for the next 3 days. And then I noticed something about halfway through my career. I remember the moment it happened where I'm feeling great on stage, and by the time I was off the stage, the feeling was gone. And, I sometimes when I go to music concerts, I say, of course some of these guys have drug and drinking problems, because can you imagine the boost, the adrenaline, the whatever serotonin rush you get from like people worshiping you and loving your art, and then you have to come down from that. And I think comedy probably there's other issues involved with it in terms of maybe for a lot of people it's a desire for attention or it's a coping mechanism. You know, humor can sometimes be a deflection of insecurities or traumas or whatever. And I just think when you throw that all together, there's plenty of well-adjusted comedians. There's plenty of people living normal lives, et cetera, who do stand-up comedy and so affiliated sort of arts. But I think also there's a lot that goes into that, both before becoming a comedian and then sometimes even with success. That can have its own drawbacks, like I'm saying, in terms of that up and down to the extreme in terms of your emotions and happiness. So I think it's a combination of things that you just have to be, you know, kind of mentally, if you can, mentally, psychologically on guard for to keep yourself somewhat grounded when things get high and not get too down in the dumps when things kind of settle in or get low.
Oh, hello. No, there we go. Yeah, sorry about that. The mic was off for a minute.
I know that was boring, but I didn't think it was
No. It was awesome. JL, not to go too deep into the weeds, but we recently changed over our board and our system, and I am literally a sports talk radio host with zero control over my microphone. It is horrifying every single day.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway.
You got to have a lot of trust in that boardroom.
Yes, indeed. Well said. But let me follow up. Let me follow up with one thing, because this just kind of occurred to me. And I am not a stand-up comedian, right? But I do this every day for 4 hours without a co-host. And when I am done with my show, I am gassed. I have zero energy. I have to go home. I can't talk to anybody. I need like an hour before I'm even like back to being human again. And I often wonder if that's a healthy endeavor, but I really love what I do. You know, it's a blessing to be able to do this and pay your bills. So how do you, and you answered this a little bit at the end of the last question, but how do you handle that? I'm on stage, I'm making an entire room laugh, I killed it, and then boom, you walk out of that club, you go back to your hotel, and then you're just in your room. How do you traverse that space that seems to eat up some people that don't handle it well?
Yeah, I think for me, you know, obviously it would help if I could start making a room laugh. I guess maybe that's why it hasn't happened for me yet. But 21 years in, we'll keep fighting. I think what used to happen with me is I'd be so pumped up, like positively. I'd drink, I'd hang out, and I'd just feel good. I wouldn't necessarily come down from that. But it would all be positive. Now, the oddest thing happens is whether it's middle age or just adjusting, I go to sleep very easily after shows because I basically get the adrenaline rush from meeting fans, you know, because there used to be when I was, you know, I'm still a relative nobody, but when I was a real nobody, it was kind of like anybody paying you a compliment, like a stranger going, "You were funny. That's amazing." Now, because I've reached a lot more people, especially, you know, through social media and YouTube and the internet, I get like my most enjoyment from meeting fans, like knowing that they specifically came out to see me. That's like a really like good, wholesome feeling. And I think it helps that I have had such a long career of anonymity that, you know, I never hit like rock star level fame and probably never will. So, but I think in a way that's kept me in a place where I can kind of take real pleasure from like good but simple moments like, hey, I met like 20 fans in this city who I've interacted with online, and that just felt, and that it's like, it's a weird thing to say, but it's like, it's kind of very pure. It's very milk and cookies instead of, you know, heroin after a show. So I think I'm, you know, a silver lining to being where I'm at, which is maybe not exactly where I want to be career-wise, is that I'm in a grounded place where I can really get that boost from just meeting fans instead of other things. And it also helps, I think, that I have a long-term girlfriend because obviously I'd be answering this question way differently, I think, if I were single.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's very fair.
The road road, man. It's a nonstop party, and I love it, and I never want to come down from this high.
I don't want to fire up season 4 of Dark Side of Comedy, JL, and see you having that credit. I don't want it, buddy. So
it'll be like the entire 4th season is dedicated to J.L. Covan. It's that epic a crash.
I don't want it, man. I don't want it. All right. Before I set you loose, we have a very special guest on hold. So for longtime listeners of the show, JL and I became familiar when he was in town doing a show. And when he told me his background, I thought it was an interesting guest to have. And then when I heard his Donald Trump impression, I'm like, we have to get JL on as somebody who has jazz knowledge to talk about the Jazz as if he were Donald Trump. So, JL, please hand the phone over to our former and now future president, President-elect Donald Trump. Your take on the Utah Jazz.
Well, it's great to be here, obviously, although it's very sad what happened today in court, where I did nothing wrong except get convicted of 34 felonies, and they're treating me like a felon. Have you ever heard of something so silly? Just because I've been convicted of felonies, they now call me a felon. But anyway, let's talk about the Utah Jazz, okay? And I knew they were in trouble. Now, you know, Spence, can I call you Spence? I'll call you Spence.
Yeah, please do, Mr. President.
I don't like wokeness, okay? I don't like DEI. But I turned on the Utah Jazz game last night, and I could have sworn I saw possibly 4 whites on the court at the same time. And I thought maybe a little DEI, maybe a little wokeness. Maybe the Utah Jazz could use a little bit of wokeness. There seems to be they've almost gone too far, if I can say that. I respect it, but maybe too far. And we love Big Walker, Texas Ranger Kessler, mainly because he has a beautiful girlfriend who I think just won Miss America. Can you believe that? And I wasn't even there to walk in the dressing room to see how they were doing. So we're very proud of him. And there's a guy, I thought they had Bad Bunny. You know this guy, Bad Bunny? He's a singer. I don't know if he performs in Utah, but he's a big-time deal from Puerto Rico. And I thought, is that Bad Bunny? And they said, no, sir, that's a guy named Johnny Juzang. I said, okay, well, I thought he was Bad Bunny. But, you know, and they'll call you racist if you confuse the two, I guess. But there's we're concerned. We're concerned, to be honest, with the team this year. This guy, Bryce Sensabaugh, though, has had some nice games. And didn't expect him to look the way he did. That's a very... how do you put this? The name Bryce Sensabaugh sounds like a guy whose, father owns a golf country club. And then all of a sudden I see this big guy walk up to me and I said, do you know where Bryce is? And he said, sir, I'm Bryce. And I said, whoa, the Bryce is right, I guess. But, it's a tough season. And we respect Danny Ainge, obviously. But, if he worked for me, I think I'd say you're fired, to be honest, because they're not doing too well. But they got to get this guy Cooper Flag, because we always, as I say, you got to respect the flag, right? I hope you respect the flag. But there's no better way to respect the flag than to draft somebody named Flag. So I think it would be the Patriot. But I think you'd have to dump 1 or 2 white guys, to be honest, because if you put out a starting lineup of all white guys in 2025, I mean, it's basically like that Western Kentucky. Was that the team that played Kentucky or something when it was like all 5 African Americans versus all 5 white people? It's like going to look like you went in a time machine in the Utah Jazz. So we don't need that. But I like Colin Sexton. I like his name, Sex. And I also like the fact they call him Young Bull. He's a tough guy. And he looks like, you think he should have played football, I think, because he's like the most athletic guy I've ever seen. He's just like a muscle. He's like if you saw the new Sonic the Hedgehog movie, he has a friend called, what's his name? I don't know. Idris Elba did the voice. But he's just a big muscle. And he's like, Colin Sexton could be in Sonic the Hedgehog, I think. I think they should look into that, maybe trade him for some draft picks to the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise and let him, he can do Sonic, and very fast and strong. And that would fit, he'd be a good fit, I think, for the Sonic franchise. And then maybe you get some draft picks for Danny Ainge to pick some people in the low 20s of a future draft.
Oh, goodness. For the first time you did that on the show, I knew that we had to bring this back at least once a year. It is gold, man. I always appreciate the time. Where can people go find your work? You've had a big year. Where can people find the work?
Yeah, thank you. I would say jlcomedy.com. And also just one little, like I have a special coming out on YouTube. Like you can find my YouTube links through my website or just Google, JL Covan and it'll take you to YouTube. But I have a stand-up special as Trump. Like it's Trump doing a 45-minute stand-up special. I don't break character. It's just Trump. That comes out on Inauguration Day. Can I say the title of the special? It has nothing crude in it, but it has a crude illusion.
Yeah, go ahead.
The title is Inauguration is My Favorite N-Word. So that will be on my YouTube channel on Inauguration Day. So yeah, just check out my website. There's tons of stuff on YouTube. I write a lot. I've got gigs coming up, not in Utah. I'll be in Vegas in March. So as far as regional concerns. But yeah, just jlcomedy.com. Just bookmark it. There's always good stuff going on for me there and on social media. So I always appreciate the time, and I hope the Jazz can get the 1 or 2 pick.
There we go. There we go. We're with you. JL Covan, one of my favorites. He's a really, really funny guy. He's got his new special streaming on Amazon Prime. As he referenced, you can find him on his Twitter page at JL Covan or his website, jlcomedy.com. All right, catch a quick break. Coming up on the other side, Max Chadwick stops by. Comprehensive preview of the game that kicks off in 1 hour. It is the Cotton Bowl between Ohio State and Texas. You can hear all of that action right here on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be a part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, special thanks to JL Covan. Stopped by last segment. It's a little comic relief on a Friday afternoon. Big game coming up just under an hour away from the Cotton Bowl. It's Ohio State and it's Texas. You can hear that game here on our radio station on ESPN 700. Our next guest joins us from time to time to talk a little football on a big Friday. It's Max Chadwick. Max, happy Friday, man. How we doing?
Good. How you guys doing?
I'm well, buddy. Appreciate the time. So before we get to tonight, what were your biggest takeaways from a really entertaining back-and-forth game as Marcus Freeman and Notre Dame, they march on to win a national championship? What were your takeaways from the game last night?
Yeah, I was actually at that game
Nice.
last night. It was absolutely electric. I will admit I'm a lifelong Penn State fan. My whole family is, so it was heartbreaking to say the least, but it was a terrific job by Notre Dame to win that game. From a Penn State perspective, I think it really just magnified how bad the receiver problem has gotten for them. I mean, really, you look at their stats from last night, the wide receiver for Penn State had 0 catches for -3 yards because that last play of all the laterals actually got -3 yards for one of the receivers there. So somehow they have negative yards receiving in a playoff game. It's just unacceptable, honestly. And it's just ironic considering Penn State has a NFL quarterback for the first time since like Kerry Collins. And yet now they can't find a wide receiver to save their life. And that was kind of their undoing this entire season, honestly. It's why they lost the Ohio State game. It's why they probably lost the Oregon game. And it's why they lost the Notre Dame game, in my opinion. But credit to Notre Dame. They were outstanding. Riley Leonard came up big for them. He had a couple really nice passes in there. Also made a lot of damage as a runner. Notre Dame just played really, really sound football, never really wavered, even with 10-0 Penn State. So credit to them. And it's going to be really fun to see how they play between Ohio State and Texas in the national championship game.
So I hate to rub salt in the wound, Max. I didn't know you were a Penn State guy, but I will follow up because obviously you have innate knowledge and intimate knowledge of the program. Is this, I think it's 12 straight L's to top 5 teams for James Franklin and Penn State. What gives there? I mean, I feel like most people really respect him as a coach, and I don't think anybody would say he's a bad coach at all, but he can't seem to get over the hump when it comes to top 5 teams. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat fair to be talking about that, but also I think it's unfair at the same time because I mean you look at anyone's record against top 5 teams, like it's probably not very good unless you are one of those top 5 teams. The one thing I'll say about Penn State compared to other programs in college football, Penn State is not even close to being a top 5 program in college football, right? So they're more of like a top 10 to 15 program. If you look at how much they're spending in NIL, it's actually really bad compared to some of the other top programs that are still alive right now in the college football playoffs. So I actually think Penn State is doing more with less with James Franklin at the helm. Yes, I understand that it's frustrating losing to Ohio State every year, losing to Michigan every year, losing these big games like Notre Dame and all that. But at the same time, I think people need to understand the gap in resources between Penn State and some of these other top programs that are still alive right now. I think James Franklin's doing a terrific job at Penn State, and I think he should be commended for how good a job he did this year.
Yeah, that's well said. And like I said, I wasn't trying to imply that he's not good at his job. I mean, obviously he's very good, or they wouldn't keep him and have kept him for over a decade now. But what stands out most to you about the growth of Marcus Freeman, who at the age of 35 got his first head coaching job? And when your first head coaching job is Notre Dame, you obviously are pretty bright. Didn't start off well after he took over for Brian Kelly. There was that Marshall loss at home, and even week 2 this year. We all know about that Northern Illinois loss. But at the age of 39, he's got a shot to win a national championship. What stands out to you about his growth?
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I remember when Brian Kelly left and Freeman was the defensive coordinator at that time. He was promoted to the head coach. Everyone in that building erupted, right? They were so happy. And I think it just kind of speaks to the kind of leader he is. And I think he's a player's coach. The players absolutely adore him. I mean, every player I've talked to and every player I've seen in Notre Dame, they all would run through a brick wall for Marcus Freeman, honestly. So he's a player's coach, and also he's a terrific defensive mind at the same time as well. So you combine those two together. Obviously, he does a really good job in recruiting, getting guys from the portal. Yeah, I think it really is great for him. Now, obviously, there is always that frustration. If you're at Notre Dame, for Penn State fans, really, the frustrating part is, okay, you can't be the top teams. For Notre Dame, it's, hey, we're losing these dumb games every year, right? You mentioned the Marshall loss. You mentioned even the Stanford loss they had a couple years ago as well. They lost to Northern Illinois this year. There are some dumb games that he seems to lose, but at the same time, he is pulling off some major victories at the same time, and he's having no problem toppling over the top teams in college football a little bit like James Franklin has so far. So he still has to get rid of those 1 or 2 games every year that it just seems to be why on earth is Notre Dame losing though they're 3 touchdown favorites. But other than that, he's been a terrific coach, and he's got a chance to win a national title next Monday, which is pretty incredible.
All right, moving over to tonight. Let me get your thoughts on the line. Ohio State is a 6-point favorite. That feels low, Max. Maybe it's because they are playing just a couple hundred miles away from Austin. But give me your thoughts on the spread before we dig into the actual matchup.
Yeah, I'd probably take Ohio State as well. I think Ohio State is just playing like the best team in the country right now. And I said it before, I think Ohio State at their best is unbeatable. Honestly, if you're Texas or if you're Notre Dame, if Ohio State wins tonight, you just got to hope you catch Ohio State on a bad day, honestly. Because other than that, they look unbeatable at their best football right now. Even if Texas goes out there and plays their best football, I still think Ohio State wins that game if they play their best brand of football. So they're the best team in the country. It's why I picked them to win the national title preseason. I still think it'd be a great game tonight, though. I do think there's a world where Texas can pull this game off, considering their defense is playing lights out. It might be the best defense in the country. I certainly think it's the best secondary in the country, so it might be able to contain Ohio State's weapons a little bit. But like I said, at this point right now, between their offense and defense and the way they're coaching right now, I think Ohio State is the best team in the country.
And I would agree with that. Let me ask you about yeah, and I find this just wild. And I understand he hasn't beat Michigan in 4 straight tries. Do you really think there's a chance? Because Ohio State fans, and I don't look at message boards to do my radio show, but you cannot escape the criticism that Ryan Day seems to receive, even though he wins a ton of games. And even though they're on the precipice of potentially playing for a national championship, if they don't get it done tonight, is he legitimately in trouble?
No, not this year at least. I think there's a conversation to be had next year if they continue to lose to Michigan and some of the other big games. But I think he pretty much guaranteed his job security after beating Oregon in the Rose Bowl. That was a major, major victory. Not only did they win the game, they curb stomped Oregon in that Rose Bowl. So I think he did that on low. Put it this way. If they lost to Tennessee in the first round, there would have been more of a conversation, in my opinion. I don't know if it still would have happened. I think Ohio State, the administration, I think likes Ryan Day a lot more than the fans might. But at the same time, so if they lost to Tennessee, maybe then he would get fired. But once he beat Tennessee, I would say it was highly unlikely. And then once he beat Oregon, it's impossible. He's absolutely going to be coaching Ohio State next year. Now, we'll see if they don't win the national title. Like, if he wins the national title this year, he could probably buy a down year next year. But if they don't win it all this year, it might be a little harder for him to have a down year next year, which would be tough because they are losing a lot of talent from this year's team.
So you referenced the potential of Texas maybe getting this thing done, and Steve Sarkisian, Cotton Bowl MVP for BYU back in 1997. Known around college football as one of the most creative play callers that we have in the sport. What do you anticipate from? We know they want to run the football, but do you think we could see Sark just maybe try to air it out, catch Ohio State off guard, even though Ohio State's secondary didn't allow Oregon any space when they were trying to throw the ball? What offensively? What do you think we see from Texas tonight?
Yeah, I think so. Texas runs a lot of outside zone, which basically, as it's implied, is run to the outside. The problem is Ohio State is like the best team in the country defending outside zone. So I struggle. It could be a lot like the Arizona State game where, when Texas beat Clemson, they ran all over them. Arizona State, they really struggled, and that's why they almost lost that game. I think it could be like that, too. I think it's going to come into Quinn Ewers, honestly. If I'm Quinn Ewers, what I would do is, the secondary for Ohio State is absolutely terrific, like you said. But the problem is I think the outside corners are good, not great. Like, I think Denzel Burke and Davison Igbinosun are decent players, but they're not superstars. And I think there's a chance for Texas to win on the perimeter in this game. I don't think they're going to be able to get over the middle of the field. I know Texas and Steve Sarkisian loves to throw over the middle of the field, all their RPOs and all the slant routes and all that they run. With Caleb Downs there, with Latham Ransom there, I just don't know how it's going to work. I think attacking the sidelines in this game is probably going to be key to find out. And Quinter's got to make some big throws. He's got to make some big throws. He's probably has to play the game of his life in order to win this game. But I think that is probably how I would be structuring my offense if I'm Steve Sarkisian.
You think we see Arch at all? You think we see any creative packages with Arch Manning?
Yeah, I think we could. I think in the red zone especially. I always said it's how crazy is it that we're talking about a Manning going into the game for his rushing ability? Like, I never, after watching Peyton and Eli for my entire childhood, I never thought that a Manning would ever have great legs or anything like that. But he does bring that element. I know a lot of people are going to say if Quinn throws a pick tonight, put in Arch. They're not putting in Arch. They're going to live and die by Quinn Ewers. So I think he's going to get the entire game today. It will be Arch's team next year. So, but I do think Arch, the most they'll get is like you said, those packages that they run all game. I don't think, unless it's an absolute disaster, I don't think they'll be benching Quinn Ewers tonight.
Do you have a comp for Jeremiah Smith? I mean, I know you do a lot of stuff with the draft and you analyze prospects. It is so wild to me. I have a 23-year-old son. He's 5 years younger than my son. And he's just one of those guys that pops right off the screen, no matter what you're watching. Is there a comp? Like, who does he remind you of, and what sort of pro do you think he'll be once he's allowed to leave and go to the NFL?
He'll be an absolute superstar. He is a guy that, he's the highest rated wide receiver to ever come out of high school in the recruiting era, and he's proving why immediately. Like, he's living up to that kind of hype in his first year, which is just absolutely outrageous. As for comps, I've thrown out the Julio Jones one before, who's one of the greatest receivers who's ever lived. I've heard Andre Johnson a lot as well. I love that comp too. I think he does play a lot like him. Who's now a Hall of Famer as well. So, I mean, when you're throwing out comps to, guys wearing gold jackets right now, that just shows you how kind of a special talent Jeremiah Smith is. I cannot remember the last 19-year-old receiver who was this freaking good immediately in college. Like, even Julio was not this good immediately in college. Calvin Johnson was not this good immediately at Georgia Tech. I think Jeremiah Smith has all the makings, and everything I've heard, not only is he physically gifted out of this world, everything I've heard about him is he's the hardest worker in that facility as well, which is a big reason why he's this good, this fast. Jeremiah Smith absolutely is going to be is a superstar, not only in college football, but probably in the NFL later on too.
All right, couple of minutes left before I set you loose. Let's just do this exercise. Let's say Texas is somehow gets it done. Let's say there's an upset tonight, and it's Texas-Notre Dame. How do those two teams match up?
It'll be ugly. It'll be a ugly football game. I think it'll be two teams that are going to try to dominate. It might be the two best secondaries in the country between Texas and Notre Dame if that does happen, honestly, the way Notre Dame's secondary has been playing lately. So it'll be two teams that are really going to struggle to throw the football. It might come down to who runs the ball better. That'll be a great game. I do think it'll be a very low-scoring game, though. So if Texas does pull it off tonight, if I'm you, I'll be sprinting to bet the under in that national championship game.
On the other side, Ohio State gets it done like most people believe they will, including me and including you. You picked them to win the national championship. What does that matchup look like, Ohio State, Notre Dame?
I think, again, Notre Dame's going to try to win off their secondary. The problem is against Ohio State's receivers is going to be really tough. Now, it's going to be really interesting to see because Notre Dame obviously lost that heartbreaker to Ohio State last year. Jeremiah Love in his post-game press conference last night even said, I want Ohio State to win tomorrow night. We want to play them again and get revenge on them. So it should be a great game. I do think, if you're a Notre Dame fan and you're just thinking about who you rather play in order to what chances you have to win a national title, obviously Texas is the answer there. So I do think Ohio State has a pretty big advantage in that game, and honestly might even be favored by more than they are against Texas tonight. But it should be a fun game, and it would be two defensive games as well, I think. But I think Ohio State has a little bit of a bigger advantage over Notre Dame than Texas does.
Last thing, Max, I'll set you loose on this. I'll take advantage of the space to ask a smart football guy, college football guy, a local question regarding the University of Utah, and I'll keep it general because what we're seeing now is Utah football has 16 transfers coming in. They've got 25 incoming freshmen. We're going to see 41 new players. It's a turnover that we have never seen here, not even close. And obviously that's a reflection of the new day and age of college football and a very disappointing season that Utah had a year ago. And as you know, Max, Kyle Whittingham has built Utah football with the ethos of we recruit and we develop. And the best Utah football seasons dating back to the Fiesta Bowl in 2004, Sugar Bowl in 2008, and then back-to-back Pac-12 championships have come when Utah has been able to recruit, develop, and then win with third or fourth year players. Is that still a model that's sustainable in the modern day and age of college football?
I think to an extent you can do it. I struggle if you're solely relying on it. I think it's kind of like, when NFL adopted free agency, I think back in the 70s. You really have to treat it like that. I mean, really, that's what the portal is, basically, is free agency. Obviously, it's way more Wild West than NFL free agency is. It was a little more structured, but you got to treat it that way, right? You got to treat it like, hey, yeah, we could recruit and hope these high schoolers develop into players we think they could be, which is a lot like the NFL draft, where you draft college players and hope they can develop into NFL players. But at the same time, you go, hey, we know this guy is a really good college football player because we've seen it in another school. We could bring him in and pretty much have a guaranteed good player based off what we saw from his last school. So you got to be a balance. Really, you can't build a team solely off the portal, and you can't build a team solely off recruiting. So I think Kyle Whittingham's doing a good job of kind of realizing that and bringing some guys in like Devin Dampierre. I'm really excited about him. He is a really, really talented quarterback that they're bringing in, honestly. But I think just looking at the roster they're doing right now, I think Utah's doing a little bit of a better job of getting to the new age of college football as it is right now.
All right, Max. Appreciate the time, man. Enjoy that game tonight. We'll get you back on again soon.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Max Chadwick. Did you hear it? Did you hear it at the end? I told you.
Yeah.
That's when you know that the person you're interviewing has zero clue who he's talking to. When you get all right, guys, thanks. There's literally one guy, unless there are two hosts that have the very same dapper voice. There's a guy that's interviewed you all year, and that's when you know at the end, for our radio listeners, little peek behind the curtain, little inside baseball. When you know that the guy has zero clue who he's talking to, he drops all right, guys, thanks. You caught it, right?
I did. I think you maybe pay more attention to it. Maybe,
yeah, that's a life
maybe
curse.
It's a personal thing.
It's a life curse of mine. I pay too much attention to mundane, dumb stuff.
It's fair.
Need to let it go.
It's okay.
Working on it, man.
Max appreciates you, I'm sure.
Working on it. But good stuff from Max Chadwick from Pro Football Focus. Appreciate his time. And the ESPN 700 Cash Kickoff is here. Time for your shot to win $1,000 in cash to pay your bills. Text contest right now to 508-777-1000. That's contest to 508-777-1000 for a chance to win for a chance to win $1,000 in cash in this nationwide contest. Good luck from all of us over here at ESPN. Also, time for your chance to win some tickets for the Utah men's basketball team. Text Utes right now to 33986 to enter to win tickets for the Utah men's basketball team back in action coming up tomorrow. All right, 3 hours down, about 40 minutes to go. We're going to say goodnight a little bit early, 5:30. So about 35 minutes to go. We'll send you down to the Cotton Bowl. We'll get you down there in time for kickoff with Ohio State and Texas. So keep it right here on a Friday on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Proud to be a part of Utah's ESPN radio network. All right, Drive at 5 time. Your commute home on a Friday afternoon starts right now. Congratulations, weekend time. Happy Friday. Hope you're having a great week. Great start to the new year. This chilly, cold January Friday afternoon. Looks like we are in for some inclement weather coming up this weekend. Looks like we're going to hit with a little snow tomorrow. And then 30 degrees Sunday, 29 on Monday. So snowy and cold for the next little bit. That's called January in Utah. Drive at 5 time. Brought to you tonight by our good friends at Prize Picks. You can download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. So download that Prize Picks app today. Use the promo code ESPN700 to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. It's very easy. You can win up to 1,000 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. All you do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. So shout out to our good friends at Prize Picks. Just reviewing some of these stories that we have covered today, some of the topics in the topic tree that we've covered today.
There you
go. We woke up to some surprising news that Real Salt Lake is trading away Chicho Arango. Chicho Arango has been traded to San Jose in exchange for pennies on the dollar, in my opinion. $1.5 million in general allocation money and an open international spot. Seattle just acquired Jesus Ferreira, and I believe Chicho's a much better player. They paid like 5 times the price to Dallas that RSL was able to get for Chicho. So I talked a little about that a little bit earlier. Of course, football kind of top of mind. Not kind of top of mind, but top of mind is the second CFP semifinal. It's the Goodyear Cotton Bowl. It comes your way in just about 20 minutes from now. Ohio State and Texas. Ohio State is a 6-point favorite in this game. And this game is being played in Arlington, so they're expecting, it looks like from what we can see on television so far with some of the pregame stuff, we are seeing a lot of burnt orange, as you would expect, a lot of Texas fans making the trip. You know, one of the things that we've talked about, I believe college football is made to be played on college campuses. And I would even include a college football semifinal in that mix. The only game, and as we kind of lean into this model, you know, and we've talked a lot about people who believe the Rose Bowl should just be the college football answer to the Super Bowl. That's a Joel Klatt thing. He's been on that for a while. Josh Pate's talked about it. A lot of college football media members believe that makes sense. And can you preserve bowl games if they're played on college campuses? I don't know. But, I mean, imagine if you were an Ohio State fan tonight or a Notre Dame fan last night or whatever it is, and the semifinal in the college football playoff is played in Columbus, or it's played in Austin, or it's played in, wherever the team that is the highest seed, it's played on that campus. I mean, if you want to get weird for a second, can you imagine if Utah football was able to do what we all thought they were going to do in the Big 12 year one, crack the CFP, maybe advance a game or two, and suddenly there's a semifinal matchup. Holy smokes, we have more RSL news. I'm just seeing this. Suddenly there's a semifinal college football matchup that is like Utah, Texas, and it's being played in Salt Lake, if we can get weird for a second. We've been getting weird on the show all day. I mean, hell, yesterday with Tony Jones, we played a hypothetical that in 2 years, the Jazz starting front court is Cooper Flagg, A.J. DeBanza, and Larry Markkinen. So we've been getting weird on the show all week. So let's get weird. I mean, imagine that. You know, the college football semifinal being played on a college campus. And it does feel like some of the neutral stuff, the neutral field stuff just diminishes the things that I perceive to be great about college football. And that ultimately is the way it feels when they're playing a game on campus and the game day feel. And yes, the pageantry, I can roll my eyes on that, from time to time. But the Ute Walk, the band, all the things that come with playing a game on a college campus, tailgating. Can you imagine the tailgate scene if there's a CFP semifinal played on a college campus? Like, I feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity. Now, of course, money talks, and all of these bowl games, including the Goodyear Cotton Bowl, you have ties to venues and have ties to cities. And, I don't take that lightly. I understand what that means. And ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody is motivated by just wanting to keep their job. It's not rocket science. And I would imagine if the powers that be in television or college football power brokers broached the idea of getting rid of bowl games and just using the Rose Bowl as the final game of the year, they would receive a tremendous amount of pushback and, quite frankly, probably a lot of legal red tape that they'd have to traverse to get that done. But I felt this way watching Notre Dame Penn State last night, which turned out to be just a great, great football game. Hoping for the same tonight. I do think we will see a little bit more offense, a little bit more back and forth than we saw last night with the Penn State Notre Dame game. But I do think that game turned out to be a really, really quality, excellent, well-coached college football game that really went down right to the end. And Marcus Freeman continues to be this like Sean McVay rising type star in the business. But I couldn't help but wonder, like, what if this was played at one of these campuses? And by the way, two of the most storied college football atmospheres in the entire country, where Penn State, Happy Valley, 100,000 plus. I've been there once. I saw Penn State, BYU back in the early 90s. I've never been to Notre Dame. I think that's something that would be really cool. But I just couldn't help but consider that because, of course, as we continue to diagnose and not prognosticate and learn about this really new sport and new format in this sport that has changed so rapidly, there are things I think that do need to be adjusted as far as the seeding early on. I was talking about this with Sean during Crosstalk, and there has been a bit of a March Madness feel because we did see some Cinderellas invited to the dance, namely SMU, Boise State. Got to put ASU in there as well. Say what you want about the Big 12 compared to the SEC and the Big 10. There are Cinderellas invited to the dance, but just like in March Madness, the Cinderellas typically bow out after winning a couple of games in the tournament. And you don't really see the George Masons of the world reaching the Final Four more than once every, 10, 15 years. Typically, the cream rises to the top. There are exceptions there. So, seeding early on, and if you win your conference in college basketball, we were talking about this during Crosstalk earlier, you don't automatically, slide into a high seed in the NCAA tournament. I mean, more often than not, the Mountain West Conference champion typically ends up with like a 7, 8, or a 9 seed. So that's something I think college football can actually take from college basketball. Yes, make space for conference champs. It should matter that you won your conference. Make space for the teams that win the conference, 100%. But don't just slot them in to a first-round bye when it is pretty clear that there is a bit of a mismatch and a talent gap. What do you think about that, Porter? The idea that in college basketball they do value conference championships. I mean, for the smaller schools, that's the only path to making the NCAAs. You win the MAC or MEAC or whatever, and you're in, but you're not automatically like a top 5 seed. More often than not, those teams are seeded low. Do you think that's something college football should look to adapt a little bit?
Maybe, but I think that the scale should less than conferences and whatnot in that regard, because I think especially in college football, we don't know what that's going to look like from year to year. But what I do think should happen is you should get the pool of 16 teams or however many teams you eventually decide on, and the seeding happens completely independently, right? Similarly to the NCAA March Madness, to the way they do it in college basketball. I like the idea. Who was it earlier in the show, or maybe yesterday? Maybe it was Yogi or Ted who mentioned maybe 16 teams. And the 16 teams are all the conference champs and the at-large bids, but none of the seeding is decided by any of that. The seeding is decided, and maybe that's the only thing the committee does is they decide the seeding, right? I think once we narrow it down to the teams that we believe should be in the playoff, we can then go in and seed it accordingly, and I think that's the easiest way to do it. The easiest way to make that realistic on the committee, Spence, I think comes down to schedule uniformity across the country, across college football. That's where whatever the next iteration of the sport looks like when we have to have a what used to be the NCAA, a body at the top, telling the conferences, hey, it's 8 games here, it's 8 games here, it's 9 games for your conference, or avoiding the situations where you have certain teams in the Big Ten playing 8 home games in a season. You have Alabama playing Mercer in late November. I understand, and we've talked a lot about how that helps certain programs, but if we're talking about the college football playoff and we're talking about the best product on the field in December and January, that's how I would like to see it. And honestly, I'm cool with 16 teams. You can, to my liking, go higher than that if you want to. Get all the best teams in there and have a tournament, not a gimmicky almost tournament that we have kind of moved away from until this point, but we're still not all the way there.
Yeah, no half measures. I think your points are well taken, and I wholeheartedly agree on scheduling uniformity. It is beyond wild to me that we have not landed that plane, because every powerful person in college football, when asked about it, appears to agree. And it's beyond time that you do that, because it just leaves way too much up to the whole eye test, the ambiguity about what exactly the committee is looking at, how often are you watching games together. And then that just opens up the entire process to a tremendous amount of criticism from people that cover the sport, people that watch the sport, and seem at times to have a better pulse on what the sport needs than the people actually calling the shots. Some things seem so simple. Scheduling uniformity to me is really near the top of the list.
Yeah, I think the big problems that are facing college football right now, and the things that I think are most front-facing, can be solved with a few simple fixes, which is why it's so frustrating to me, Spence, that's one of them. And the other one is schedule uniformity outside of football, right? I'm talking the academic calendar. I'm talking transfer portals. Like, the fact that there are players on these two teams, Spence, that are probably getting recruited right now by other teams is ridiculous. It's stupid. It's asinine. Mm-hmm. And I think that the schedule uniformity both during the season and off season is something that would make the feeling of chaos in college football not dissipate all the way, but it would maybe cut it in half or more. And it's something that I just don't understand why it's not happening quicker.
All right, are we going to be brave and double down on our bet from last? I mean, the thing is, I can't take Texas for the sake of the show. I really.
That's where I'm at now too.
Okay. So
yesterday I could, because it was I genuinely thought it came down to an interception late in the game, maybe a last-second field goal. I don't feel that way today.
So what's your gut tell you? Give me a final score-ish. Give me a prediction. How do you think it plays out tonight? 15 minutes away from kickoff now.
Yeah, on a reminder, if you did listen to the last 5 minutes of the show last night, you didn't even need to watch the game. It played out exactly how you and I said.
Yeah, no lies. No lies detected.
Maybe watch the game tonight just in case. But I've got Ohio State winning it, and I have them covering the spread as well. I think this is a team that is rolling. And the rivalry loss late in the regular season, not winning the Big Ten title, I think that's maybe helped Ohio State kind of refocus and get the ship rolling in January in a way that no one else in the country is right now. I just haven't seen anyone play to their level in the last probably month and a half outside of the loss to Michigan. And for that reason, I got Ohio State. I've got them winning 31-20. We'll see. We'll see. Texas does have some playmakers, Spence, and as we mentioned earlier, they're in Arlington. They're essentially at home. There's a lot of burnt orange in that stadium, and that could be a factor in this one. But unlike yesterday, which I thought it would be back and forth, it would be last minute. This one, I think that if Texas keeps it close, it's going to be one of those games where it feels like they're kind of trudging uphill the whole time, trying to keep Ohio State from breaking it loose. And I do think there's a chance that Ohio State does that and makes it even larger than the spread, or my prediction of 31-20.
I'm going to go 37-24. I think Ohio State wins. I think they cover, and I think they hit the over. I think the over is the play here. Again, that spread is only 6. It has not moved much. Wise guys have not been into this game. We have not seen shark bettors move the line at all. We have not seen massive money go one way or the other. The money line is minus 260 towards Ohio State, plus 215 for Texas. Over-under right now is 51.5. So we'll have that game for you. We are your home of the biggest and most exciting football games around in the market, whether it's college or pro. So the Goodyear Cotton Bowl Classic tonight, Ohio State, Texas. You can hear that on our station. It is the beginning of a really fun football weekend. Pro football takes center stage tomorrow as my favorite weekend of the playoffs in the NFL takes place tomorrow at the as far as the wild card stuff. Chargers, Texans will be your first game out of the gate. Steelers, Ravens, your night game. No Zay Flowers in that game. Your Sunday tilt are the Broncos and the Bills. We've got the Packers and the Eagles, Commanders and Bucks. That's your Sunday night game. And then on Monday, of course, we'll be back on air with a full show, and then you'll hear the Vikings and the Rams, little Monday Night Football action on the program. All right, before we say goodnight and send it over to the Goodyear Cotton Bowl between Ohio State and Texas, we have randomly more RSL breaking news, because I know that's what you want, start of a football season. Gavin Beavers is signing in it's a Danish club. Look, okay, I do the best I can to know about soccer. I've never heard of this place. Well, I've heard of the Netherlands. I just don't even know anything about this club. A Danish club is signing Gavin Beavers, a 19 years old, highly rated goalkeeper. Our guy Tom Bogert, who joined the show, ironically enough. You know what's funny, Porter? I'm now realizing Tom, during the interview, said, I asked him, are they going to look to make a move in goal as far as the struggles from McMath and Gavin? He said, well, yeah, I can tell you that that's exactly what they're trying to do. And then our guy drops a bomb 30 minutes after he gets off air with us.
Yeah, I was going to say, he kind of alluded to stuff still going on with RSL, because I think when we brought him on initially, he was talking about how he was like still on the phone, still working the phones in that regard. So yeah, they're more news in RSL front, and maybe they're not done yet with the way that it looks right now, Spence. It's seems like kind of a fire sale going on.
Yeah, you have to wonder, and before we say goodnight, you just have to wonder if that locker room was a lot more fractured than anybody knew, because as of now, they moved on from Chicho Arango, they moved on from Anderson Julio, they moved on from Matt Crooks, they sold Andres Gomez last year. That's the bulk of the attacking talent they had on the roster. They did make a lot of additions during the summer transfer window, but now they've moved on from Gavin Beavers, leaving them only with Zach McMath as the keeper. We'll see what sort of moves that they make. All right, Porter, before we get out of here and send it over to the Cotton Bowl, what comes our way on a Monday edition of the radio show?
On a Monday edition of the show, well, you mentioned RSL. They're going to have some explaining to do.
Yeah, they do.
Maybe not a bad way, not saying that, but a lot of moves over the last 24 hours and the rest of the offseason. We'll have a front office member from Real Salt Lake to be determined on the show on Monday. Bobby Marks will join us to talk some NBA, and then, of course, it's football from there. Dave Bartu, who I saw a prediction from Dave that was way back in July. Well, he nailed the Final Four of the college football playoff and the Final Three as well. Dave Bartu will give us a little insight on how he did that and how he does that. And we'll catch up with the current NFL running back, former Ute, Zach Moss, on the program.
Very nice. Very nice.
While you're hosting.
Which is rare because he and Porter are homies. So usually when I'm taking a little time off, I could use a little time off at some point.
You should get some.
Maybe I'll do that soon. I need it.
It's early in the year, but you may have some PTO accrued.
Yeah, I couldn't take any time off because I run through my PTO during the summer because that's when it's quiet. You can take trips. But yeah, I think your boy needs a vacation. I'll leave that there. Special thank you on this Friday's show to the great Yogi Roth, Howard Beck, Tom Bogert, J.L. Covan, and Max Chadwick. There's some college football, there's some NFL, there's some NBA, a little RSL, a little stand-up comedy relief on a Friday too, because who doesn't want to laugh from time to time? For any sound you may have missed from the show today or all week or whenever, we have like 25,000 episodes on our podcast page. It's called The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's available wherever you get your shows. If you have some time this weekend, give us a subscription or a follow along and then say nice things in the comments. Give us all the stars they can on your preferred podcast catcher, and you will be eternally blessed. For Porter Larson, my name is Spence Checketts saying goodnight. Cotton Bowl coming up next on the other side. Have a great weekend. Be good to yourself and be good to each other. Talk to you on Monday right here on ESPN.